Great, great. That's the correct return. All right, this is it. Okay, but you hear this?
There's just people coming down.
Thank you. All right, sorry for that, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. New laptop. My name is Rob Champetti. I have the privilege of serving as the chairman of our Newburyport Zoning Board of Appeals. In a moment, I'm just going to go through introduction of the board members and then a quick overview of the flow this evening for those that may have not been before a city board or commission, or specifically our board. I would like to go through exactly how the flow will go and what to expect. To begin with, we're going to call roll. We'll establish whether we have a quorum. In order to conduct business this evening, we need to have at least 4 members of the ZBA that are present. I can see obviously that we have at least 4. Once we go through take roll, I'll establish which of those members are the voting members, and then we will get into our public hearings. Do we have any continuances? That I don't have the latest sheet, but I want to make sure.
We have a continuous request for 8 Jefferson Court
Right.
to May 28th.
Is there, and all the others are the other 4 going forward?
Yeah.
Okay. The one request for continuance, normally if these are out of order, we would take, well, normally we take any request for continuance out of order just in case folks are here. They don't have to wait until full hearings are completed before they get word that it matters going to be continued. So we'll take on the continuance of 8 Jefferson Court, and then we'll follow the agenda. So calling to order the Newburyport Zoning Board of Appeals for April 23rd, 2024. Calling the roll, Mr. Swanton. Here. Mr. Bennett. Here. Mr. Shannon. Here. Mr. Ginton. Is it? And we are absent Lynn Scow, and we are absent and Stephen Delisle. Thank you. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 members that are present. All 5 will be participating this evening. Our 5 voting members, therefore, will be everyone that's up before you. So for legal purposes, all of our 5 members will be voting on every application. So having established a quorum, we can just go quickly through how the flow works, and then we'll jump right into our business this evening. So what we typically do here at the ZBA is, of course, we're running still a Zoom platform that is running in parallel with the live meeting. We'll be monitoring who is watching and who's participating, and to the extent we get into public comment, folks will be able to raise their hand electronically. We'll see them, recognize them, unmute their mic, and we'll hear from them. But the way we begin the flow is I will start by reading the legal notice for each application. We read it by address, the name of the applicant, and a description of what relief is being sought, whether it's a variance, special permit, a special permit for nonconformities, and then just sort of natural language of exactly what the applicant seeks to do, to renovate an exterior porch, to renovate a roof line, etc., so that anyone listening without having this in front of them can still understand generally what the subject matter of the application is. Once I've read the public notice and the description, we then hear from the applicant. That's the first phase of the process. The applicant or their representative, attorney, architect, engineer, all of the above, will present the application. We ask that anyone who does speak to kindly just take the podium if you could. So this way our microphones and Zoom can pick you up. Once the application's been presented, we'll close that portion of the public hearing. We then go into public comment. That is when, and by the way, I'll just introduce to my immediate right is Caitlin Sullivan, our city planner, and Ms. Gretchen Joy, our keeper of the minutes. If you do choose to speak, I will first seek a show of hands. We'll go in the room live first. And if you wouldn't mind just again coming to the podium so that it can be recorded, give your name and address, and then simply speak your mind. We ask that everyone govern themselves to within about 2 minutes or so. I have wide discretion. We very rarely have to, ask the courtesy of someone to, wrap things up. But if it were to run into long duration, just in the interest of the evening's business, I'll usually as gently and courteously as possible ask folks to kind of wrap things up. But I'll be governing that, and then once we go through the entirety of the room and everyone has spoken, you don't need to, by the way, say you're pro or con, for or against. You may choose to do that, but you can also just simply say, I just wish to speak and be heard. So there is no column that you need to stand up for, though you may feel free to. Once everyone in the room has been polled and there are no more hands, I go to online, same thing applies. And then once everyone has had an opportunity to speak, we will close that portion of the public hearing. Just know that if you do happen to choose to pose a question as your public comment, you're free to do so, but please understand that the board won't be in a position to respond to that question. And we say that in advance so that it does not come off as discourtesy in any way to anyone who wishes to speak and phrase their comments in a question. It's not any intended discourtesy to you that we don't respond. However, we are listening. All the members will be taking notes, and you may well expect to hear some frame or form of your question when we get to the next stage of public hearings, which is questions from the board. So you're likely going to hear your questions sort of enveloped and then reposed by a member of the board. Questions from the board, we poll every member that's up here. They can ask questions about what we've heard, questions that, have come up as part of public comment. Once we've gone through every member, we'll then close the questions from the board. Then we go to the final phase of our hearings, which is deliberations. This is when the board will deliberate the legal criteria for the request, whether it's a variance, whether it's a special permit, whether the applicant and individual board members' opinions have met the burden of providing enough information to the satisfaction of each board member. We go through and it's essentially everyone's opportunity to listen to members of the ZBA think out loud. So the thinking out loud is on the fly, it's organic, and it happens along the tether line of the legal criteria of whatever the applicant is seeking relief for. Again, a variance, special permit. Once we've gone through deliberations, I close that portion of the public hearing and we go to the final phase, which is I invite a member of the ZBA to make a motion to approve. And this is done just under Robert's Rules of Order in the affirmative, which just means that they will make a motion and it always will sound like this, a motion to approve the application. That doesn't necessarily mean that the member of the ZBA intends to support it or does support it. It's simply the procedural rules by which that motion is made, it's then seconded. Once made and seconded, I call the roll, and we need at least 4 votes in the affirmative for the application to pass. That is those are the forensics of this evening and every evening. So I always like to do that just so you know what to expect. Now, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and we'll take on the first matter, which is the continuance of 8 Jefferson, and then we'll be getting right into 5 Wilson Way, which is our first substantive application. So, members of the ZBA, we have the application of Joel and Meredith Lebec, care of Lisa Mead Tower and Acosta LLC for the application of 8 Jefferson Court. This matter was continued from 3/26 to today. It's an application for variance. And the applicant has requested a continuance to 5/28. Attorney Mead, I suspect we can just move on the request. Do we have a motion to continue to 5/28? And a second.
So moved.
Thank you. Motion's made by Mr. Swanton, seconded by Mr. Bennett. Motion's made and seconded on the motion to continue to 5/28, 8 Jefferson Court. Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yeah.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
And Mr. Ginta.
Yes.
Rob Champetti, I vote yes. That's 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. The motion carries. That matter is continued to 5/28. Thank you. The next application is the application of Ben Becker. This is 5 Wilson Way. It is a special permit for nonconformities. The applicant seeks all necessary permits, permissions, and approvals to construct an addition over 500 square feet in a non-conforming lot and extend a non-conforming side yard setback. May we hear from the applicant? Let me see. Ben Becker here. Do we have,
We're accepting him.
we are? All right, let's, we'll continue that. I'm gonna put that to the bottom of the agenda and we'll see if he arrives. We'll just take it up at the end. Give him time to arrive. Okay, We are going to just move 5 Wilson Way to the bottom of our agenda of our docket. We'll go now to the application of Michael and Deborah Shepherd, care of Lisa Mead, Talbot and Costa LLC. This is the application for 8 Lincoln Street, a special permit for nonconformities. The applicant seeks all necessary permits, permissions, and approvals to construct an addition. To construct an addition greater than 500 square feet to the rear of the existing structure on a property that is non-conforming for lot area and frontage. Attorney Mead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Lisa Mead, Talbot and Costa, 30 Green Street, Newburyport, on behalf of Deborah and Michael Shepherd, and Deborah's with me here this evening. And the architect on the project is Matt Langis and Scott Brown, and Matt is with me here this evening as well. As the chair indicated, this property is at 8 Lincoln Street, and Deborah and Michael want to renovate their home by removing a more recent, rather awkward addition on the rear and replacing a portion of it, as well as restore the remaining part of the home to better reflect its original architectural style. The property is located in the R2 zoning district in the DCOD. Can you go to the next slide, please? The property was constructed in or around 1885, according to the district data sheets, and 1859, according to the assessor's records. The 1914 Sanborn and 1924 assessor's map show a different footprint than what is there today. We'll show you that in a little bit. The rear addition was constructed in 1999. That's what we're proposing to modify significantly. The addition off the east, which you'll see in a minute also, or left side, was constructed in 1951 for what appears to be to allow a hair salon. I was just telling Deborah, one of the most interesting things that have been discovered during this process was the advertisement for the hair salon opening at this address. The property is non-conforming. There are 7,417 square feet, where a minimum of 10,000 square feet is required for single family use. There's 50 feet of frontage on Lincoln Street, where 90 feet is required. And the left side setback is 6.8 feet, where 10 feet is required. And the front yard setback is 7.6, where 25 feet is required. The remainder of the property is in conformance with zoning requirements. Next slide, please. So here's the Sanborn map from 1914. I don't know, Caitlin, if you can blow that up a little bit. But you'll see, obviously, there's no addition off the back. And the side addition, there is a little side room there, but it takes a different form than what is there today. Next slide, please. And here's the 1924 assessor's map. Similarly, there's no addition off the back, and the side addition, there's no side addition either. Next slide, please. But we know Lorraine opened her beauty shop at this property in 1951. And we further know that this addition, if you go to the next slide, please, was constructed in 1951. The assessor's field card shows that, and the exact square footage and dimensions for this left side addition were on this card. So and when you see the photos of the house, if you go to the next slide, please, what you're going to see is there, in fact, is the left side addition with that left entry. And when I take you around the neighborhood in a little while, you're going to see that's a very odd place for an entry to be on a house of this nature. And in fact, what you'll see from Matt and Scott's architectural drawings is the proposal is to put the entry door back where it belongs, which essentially is where that right-hand first floor window is. But it's quite clear that an in-home beauty salon was added in 1951, and a number of the original fenestrations and additions were changed at that time. Next slide, please. And so here is this more head-on view of the front of the house. Next slide, please. And here's the side view of that construction. Next slide, please. And here's the rear addition in the back. It was kind of awkward and doesn't really meet and match the house. Next slide, please. And here's another view of the back addition. Next slide, please. And here's the other view of the back addition. It's gonna be changed. And next slide, please. And here's the site plan. So on the site plan, what you can see in kind of the peach color is the proposed addition, which is over slightly the footprint of the original rear 1999 addition. What you also see is a different entry on the front, on the steps. You can see that on the site plan as well. So the proposed addition in the rear will not impact the left side non-conforming setback. And the new addition will result in an increase in living space of 836.9 square feet. The current home has 1,864.5 square feet. So the proposed new structure will include 2,701.4 square feet. The Historic Commission has reviewed this proposal and released it for demo delay and approved the proposed plans. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt to go over the proposed drawings.
Good evening, everyone. Matt Landis, Scott Brown Architects, 48 Market Street, Newburyport, for the record. As Lisa had mentioned, this project has gone through a number of additions, but and renovations, but the area of focus really for us is this 1999 addition off the back. What we're doing is keeping the left and rear lines, and Kate, I don't know if you can blow that up a little bit more, but the left and rear lines of the addition are remaining the same. What we're essentially doing is expanding to the right and upward, and we're trying to use a lot of the existing scale, proportions, and inspiration basically from the main structure of the box. Next slide, please. So this is the existing and proposed elevations on top of each other. Our sort of approach with pushing this door that we suspect after some demolition, as Lisa had mentioned, that there's likely some evidence of the door being located where we're proposing it to be. And makes more sense once you see some surrounding context photos. I think it'll paint a clearer picture that this is a pretty consistent narrative in the context of the neighborhood. We're keeping in that context, obviously, with the vernacular on Lincoln Street by using sort of this Italianate, so it's a even Victorian style addition renovation. All of the siding, the trim and the windows are not original. They're all vinyl and aluminum. What we're proposing to do is clad wood, likely Marvin windows with 7/8 simulated divided lights. 2/2, very traditional for a Victorian style renovation. Traditional 4-inch clapboard, new leaves, new rake trim, and a roof at the main door, as you can see on the bottom drawing. With some brackets, obviously, as well, that would be sort of the same vintage of a house that would be built around that time. Next slide, please. This is the right existing and proposed elevation, showing the secondary entrance and rear extension, and then that rear dotted line delineates the original and proposed and where they meet. Next slide, please. This is the existing and rear and proposed and existing rear elevation. The entire rear gable. What we're doing is we're using that existing scale and extending it. It's sort of shown in that dotted red line on the lower drawing. That's where the existing box of the main sort of main original portion of the house exists. So we're using the proportion, extending that, raising the right eave to create a symmetrical addition off the back here. Next slide, please. So this is the existing and proposed left elevation. This is sort of showing the better view of how we're keeping the massing down by lifting a shed dormer. And that shed dormer will run all the way into the existing roof, but will be hidden from the street view. We've had a number of iterations with the scale, the location, the height of this, but I believe the drawings before you are the most appropriate from an architectural perspective and match the qualities of the existing home as well as the context of the neighborhood. But 2D drawings can be very deceiving, so we wanted to explore how this roof and how the effect on the street would look in 3D. We can go to the next slide, please. So this is a 3D view, sort of as you're coming down Lincoln Street, which is a more accurate depiction, I think, of how you can see where the project scope is and the effect on the streetscape, which I think from this point, the perspective is minimal. And what I think you'll see with the existing photos of the surrounding context is that this style addition and the way that it's configured is a pretty common thing along this street. I think that's pretty well. Next slide, please. So the addition here is not noticeable, sorry. And the highlights really are all the new changes, the new siding, blowing out the existing rakes and trim, and then highlighting that front entrance with a leaflet and some brackets. Next slide, please. So these are some of the existing photos of 8 Lincoln, and they're pretty similar to what Lisa had. The only thing that I wanted to quickly highlight is the first 2 photos are pretty similar to the renderings that we had done. So, you know, I think you can sort of flip back and forth and see how that existing view is with the proposed view to get a better idea of how this project is going to fit among the houses next to it. Next slide, please. And then just for references, the VCOD calculation sheet showing where the majority of the work we're doing is focused on the rear. And that concludes my portion of the presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions after this is finished.
Very good.
Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So the criteria for a special permit for nonconformities under section 9 is whether or not there are any new nonconformities. In this instance, there are no new nonconformities. In fact, the addition doesn't impact at all the left-hand side where we have that left-hand side setback issue. The next is whether the proposed change be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the pre-existing non-conforming structure. And here, we believe that the board can find that it won't be substantially more detrimental. First, you can see from the elevations, the architect has made a great effort to bring back the original and appropriate architectural detail for this home. Constructed in 1885, the district data sheets describe it as an Italianate cottage. And particularly the reintroduction of that door and the overhang over the door. You'll see how it is very similar to many of the other homes in the neighborhood. In fact, it was strikingly so to the Historic Commission when we showed them the photos that we're going to show you relative to the other street houses on the street. The proposed elevations, you can see the revised openings bring symmetry back to the structure and the detailing, particularly around the front door, and the relocation of the original entry. It's possible that, of course, that entry was changed with the introduction of that hair salon. And additionally, in 1999, that addition on the rear was without much thought or connection and harmony to the original structure. So renovating that to have it tie in more thoughtfully and more seamlessly to the original structure is important from a scale and massing and architectural detail comparison as well. And also, the lot is large and the new addition is essentially located on the same footprint as Matt pointed out, although a little bit further out on the right-hand side. The lot coverage and open space remain compliant with the ordinance requirements. Should we go to the next slide, please? So just so you can see the size of the lot here in the middle. So this is a great view of Lincoln Street. A lot of the houses are longer and more narrow at the front because the lots are deep lots that are more narrow at the front. It's just the way Lincoln Street was laid out. Next slide, please. So here are some of the other adjacent or abutting or nearby homes on Lincoln Street. Here's 4 Lincoln. Again, you see the overhang with the brackets on that front door. You see a side porch as well. Next slide. Again, we have side porch. This one happens to have a bay window, but you also have the overhang and brackets on the front door. Next slide. This is 5 Lincoln. It's across the street. You have the overhang and brackets. You have an addition towards the rear of this particular structure. Next slide, please. This is 7 Lincoln. Again, you have the overhang and brackets, happens to have a bay window, and then you've got the addition on the back and a porch on the side. Next slide, please. This is 10 Lincoln, this is, next door. It's got the overhang, the brackets, in addition in the back. Next slide, please. 13 Lincoln, we don't have the entry here, looks like it's a side entry, but you do have the bay window in the front. And there are also two bay, is that how you would describe a 2-bay box with 2 windows as well? Next slide, please. This is 14 and 12 Lincoln, again, very similar in shape and massing as the other ones you've seen. Next slide, please. And 16 Lincoln, here you've got the overhang and the brackets on the front and additions in the rear. Next slide, please. And here is the rendering of our structure again, as you go to the next slide, please. And here is the opposite view. So with that, we hope that the board agrees that this project is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing, pre-existing non-conforming structure, and grant a special permit for non-conformities.
Very good. Thank you.
Oh,
Attorney
excuse me, I might add, we also included 4 letters of support in the package from neighbors or nearby neighbors.
We have those. I know, I've seen those.
Yes, you have 14 Lincoln,
Okay,
I'll just say 14 Lincoln, 7 Lincoln, 18 Lincoln, and 6 Lincoln.
great. Thank you. Anything further on presentation?
No, thank you.
Great. We'll close that portion of the public hearing, and thank you for the presentation, and we will go to public comment. Anyone who wishes to speak or wish to share any comments, you'll see the slide that's up behind me. That's just sort of the quick rules of the road. Please just raise your hand and we'll recognize you. And take the podium, give your name and address. No hands, bless you. Seeing no hands in the room, we'll go online. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak? Just kindly raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, going once, going twice. We'll close the public comment and go to questions from the board. We'll start with Mr. Swanson.
I guess my first question, I just want to make sure I understand the massing, the overall square footage. So today, the assessor's record has it at 2207. And I think you mentioned it's going to 2701. I realize you're taking off the back piece and putting a bigger back piece, so it winds up at, did I get that right, 2701?
Correct, and that's correct.
Okay. This slide. You mentioned that overhang a lot, and you know, I go up and down that street, and most of the houses have that overhang. That's not coming off of the existing house, you're kind of recreating that, I guess?
That's correct, it's gone. If you could go to the existing conditions photos at the beginning. So they've taken it away, Mr. Swanton. I believe our suspicion is that when they built that side entry, or that side addition, they closed off that, there you go. They closed off that door and put the main entry for that salon on the side and used that in there, and they closed that door off.
Yep, so you're recreating it basically.
Correct.
Good, you mentioned somewhere in your slides, the building's not gonna get taller, yet it seems to be the roof in the back seems to be taller, I'm confused.
Yeah, so I'll let Matt address that, but as you know, we go by the mean height, so it's like 0.1 taller maybe. Matt, you can.
Yeah, right, so, so the existing height is, just under 20'1". It's measured to the mean. So for the back rear addition, it's about 19'10" roughly. The peak is a little taller, it's 1'9", I believe, taller than the existing. But as the definition of height is considered, it's a little bit less than what the existing portion of the main box is. That's one of the reasons why we had the renderings done, because we thought that could be a little deceiving, and thought that a perspective view would shed a better light on a more realistic depiction when you're viewing this from the street.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure I understand, I mean, Caitlin, could you put up the front elevation? Yeah, so that roof peeking up above, in the back, that's how much higher?
1'9".
1'9"?
Right.
Okay, thank you. I noticed,
So, Kaylee, would you mind going to the next slide just for a quick second? So you can see where, how far back that addition is, or how far back that roof is.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually start moving up until the back of the rear, the back of the existing rear box, if that makes sense.
well, thank you. I had other questions, but you have quite a thorough presentation and you addressed my others, so thank you.
Very good. Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, just a few. How long is the extended nonconformity on the right side?
We're not doing any extension on nonconformity. We're not, the nonconformity exists on the left side of the house.
Okay.
And
sorry.
so it's, it's completely conforming on the right hand side of
Okay,
the
on
house.
the left side, then how long is the extended nonconformity? Is the extension?
So the current nonconformity is with the front original structure,
Okay,
on the left hand side. And so we're not impacting that at all.
maybe I'm confused, help me.
Yeah.
The extension on the, as it extends on the right side, gets closer to the property line, correct?
It is, but it's
Is that-
10, it's 10-8, it meets the zoning requirements.
Thank you. That's
Yes.
what I was
Yep.
trying to get at in an
Sure.
inartful way.
Yep.
Can you tell me, I may have overlooked it, what are the numbers for lot coverage and open space, assuming the approval of the project?
Sure, so the lot coverage, assuming approval of the project, is 23.7, and the open space is 66.5. So in the open space, you can't be less than 40. And in the lot coverage, the maximum is 25.
Right, okay,
There's the table.
gotcha, sorry. I think that's all I have, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Chen?
Yeah, just a couple. I noticed there were 4 letters of support from 14, 7, 18, and 6. 10, Lincoln, I think, is gonna see the addition closer to them. Do we know if we heard from 10?
That's. I had emailed you. So, yes, he emailed us. I remember I had the conversation with her over the weekend.
Oh, 10 right next door, I thought that was behind, it was next door?
That's the Regans, right?
On the map?
Yeah, the Regans,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
correct.
no, I talked to her about it. this week.
So, I actually have an email, so, that recounts that conversation. So, they were, not concerned at all about this, addition. In fact, they said they think it looks great.
That's,
But I want to give you the full context. So, the Shepherds were permitted by right to put a pool house in the rear of this without any permits.
Yeah.
So they were a little concerned about that. That's already gone in, obviously, without any permits. And so, the Shepherds are gonna add some trees in the back, for privacy purposes, some evergreens and stuff in the back. But, her comment was the current plans will make your house look more historically balanced and conforming to the neighborhood. It looks nice.
great, okay. And then the second question was just parking. It looks like in the old days, they used to park along the entire length of the house on the other side. By putting that bump out with the steps, you're gonna knock it down to, it looks like one space. They're aware of that? Or
You said
technically,
cars
it's
in
a
there?
parking
It's a
space.
little tight, yeah, but,
Think you can get 2 in there?
fortunately, I think Mike has a smaller car and, you can fit 2. It's tight, but
Yeah, too many Coopers will make it.
close.
Okay, that's all I have for questions.
Good. And, Mr. Gibson?
The only real question that I have was again, that roof line, the picture that you showed certainly looked like that back area was higher than 2 foot.
Well, it's not, and it's deceiving because of the flat plans, right? So it's 1'9", but if you go to the renderings at the very end, the last 2 renderings. So we, as you can imagine, the Historic Commission would have a conversation about this, and we did have the conversation about it. Because it's barely visible from this view, and if you go to the next slide, Caitlin, and it's not visible from this view because it's so far back, they thought that the improvements to the house and the restoration of those detail were more important than the slight view you had of it in the other direction.
My only comments actually were the comments from the letter that you read. I think historically, it looks closer to the way it was originally. And I don't think any of the addition is sort of pushing on the neighbors at all. I think it's very similar, but better than what's there just.
Thank you.
Anything else?
My last comment is I do feel like it fits better with the surrounding homes on the street, with the additional elements that they put into it. That's all. Thank you.
Excellent. Any further comments, by any members of the ZBA? I'll say, just for myself, without repeating anything already said, I agree with the consensus. It's a thoughtful, addition and certainly historically sensitive to the restoration of an original design and original period. And certainly seems appropriate to me as well. So I don't have any further questions. Anything further before we close? Very good. We'll now go into deliberations. I'll close that portion of the public hearing. We'll now go into deliberations again. We're deliberating the special criteria for, the criteria for a special permit for non-conformities. We'll start with Mr. Swan.
Yeah, well, it's a two-pronged test. The first is, are there any new nonconformities? And there are not. And the next one is this substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than its current state, because it's not conforming currently. So by doing this, it gets substantially worse. I don't think so. I think, as it's already been said, this street has a rather homogeneous architecture as you walk up and down it, and I think this actually fits it better. I don't think it's overly used. The additions in the back, it doesn't dominate anything. The architectural details are very nice. They kind of look like they came out of that Victorian period, even the overhangs on the door. And you have 4 butters that have sent us letters supporting it, and no one's standing here objecting. So those are all in your favor. So I don't think this is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, and I can support this application.
Very good. Mr. Bennett.
I concur. Certainly, it's an overall improvement to the architectural coherence of the building for residents for sure. And again, I compliment the architects for that. It's a real addition. In the same vein, we have 4 neighborhood letters of approval. This is a large lot. It's a rather large addition. However, the project after construction will still meet lot coverage and easily meet open space. And it is consistent in terms of size and character with the neighborhood. So all that being said, I can approve this.
Very good. Mr. Chairman.
I have to agree with my colleagues, well said, and I can support the application.
Thank you, Mr. Ginta.
Yep, I'm in support of the application. I like your term, a thoughtful design.
Thank you, Mr. Ginta. And I agree. I just as I said, I support it, and for all the reasons I already stated. So I feel they've met the criteria as well. Any further deliberations? I'll close deliberations. Do we have a motion to approve?
Excuse me, and there's a condition proposed.
Yeah, we can add the condition.
We'll have the condition of the motion. Thank you. That's great. Thanks for that reminder.
I'll make a motion to approve 8 Lincoln Street, ZNC 24-7 with a condition which is associated with the sidewalk and trees. And the condition is the applicant shall replace the existing sidewalk in accordance with the specifications provided by the Department of Public Services. Said improvements shall be completed prior to building permit closeout in extenuating circumstances, including but not limited to seasonal constraints. An alternative deadline for compliance herewith may be submitted to and approved at the sole discretion of the zoning administrator.
Very good. Do we have a second? Thank you. Motion's made by Mr. Shannon and seconded by Mr. Ginta. Calling the roll. Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Ginta.
Yes.
And Rob Champetti, yes. That's 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. Motion carries. The application is approved. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Moving on to the next application. We have the application of Stephen Marshall, manager of 956th Street LLC, care of Lisa Mead Talent and Costa LLC. This is the application for the property located at 956th Street on Plum Island. It is a two-part application. The applicant seeks all necessary permissions, approvals, and permits for a special permit for nonconformities to reconstruct a single-family home with a new in-law apartment. And the applicant also seeks a special permit for the reconstruction of a single-family home with a new in-law apartment. So a special permit for nonconformities and a special permit. Attorney Mead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. For the record, Lisa Mead, Teller and Acosta, 33rd Street in Newburyport. And with me this evening is Eileen Graff, who is the architect on the project. And our clients thought we're going to be here, so maybe he'll join us soon. Maybe he's with Ben somewhere. I don't know. This is a project, as you indicated, at 7 and 9 56th Street. This is a special permit for nonconformities under the PIOD and a special permit for an in-law apartment. You can go to the next slide, please, Kate. The lot was Steve's parents' home, and they moved, and now Steve and his wife live there. And the idea is to be able to have his parents return and live there with them if this all gets approved and the renovations occur. They propose to remove the existing structure on the property and construct a FEMA and Concom compliant single-family home, including the in-law unit. And as a result, as I said, we need a PIOD special permit for nonconformities and a special permit for in-law. The Historic Commission has already approved the demolition of this structure. So the property's lot area is 9,450 square feet, where 12,000 square feet is required under the PIOD, and it provides 13.4 feet of front yard setback, where 20 feet is required. Property conforms to all other dimensional requirements. I will note that the project does not create any new nonconformities. In fact, it will clean up the front yard setback and all of the nonconformities, but for the lot area, will now be compliant with the zoning ordinance. Next slide, please. So the project proposes to add this new house, to take down the old house. It adds a story and it's raised in accordance with the FEMA requirements. Today, the cottage, which you're going to see in a minute, has a mean height of 14 feet, and it will be a mean height of 31.5 in order to comply with the flood-resistant construction requirements in the Conservation Commission Coastal Dune and Wetlands Performance Standards. The interior floor area is currently 790 square feet on a single floor. Therefore, the FAR is 16.5%. The project proposes to increase the interior floor area by building a larger first floor of 1,039 square feet and adding a second floor of 1,079 square feet, including the head house. So for a total of 2,210 square feet. The resulting increase of 1,413 square feet will put an FAR at 23.4%, which remains below the 25% maximum. The project, of course, includes adding a bedroom and increasing the total from 2 to 3, which is allowed under the ordinance. And the in-law apartment is included in that, within those square footage numbers. The in-law itself is 697 square feet. Next slide, please. So here is the existing and proposed site plan. So at the top, you can see how the cottage lays on the property. And then at the bottom, you see instead of it being, let's call it perpendicular to the street, it becomes parallel to the street, and kind of mimics the more broader or rectangular shape along 56th Street of the property itself. So you can see in the peach, the new footprint. We still have the original structure outlined underneath in hash. And then you can see the deck areas or the parking areas in the front as well. Next slide, please. Excuse me, could you just back up for a minute, Caitlin? In this slide, you can also see the front yard setback is at the top. You can see it's only 13, what did I say, 13 point, 4 feet, but in the bottom, you can see that the structure is more than 20 feet all the way around and more than exceeds the limit of minimum of 10 for pre-existing non-conforming structures on the island. Thank you. Next slide, please. So here's the existing structure. This is the front elevation. Next slide, please. And the side elevation. Next slide, please. And the back elevation, not surprising, as many cottages were built on the island. This was put in pieces and parts over time of all different kinds of materials and lumber, and has some significant structural issues, which went to the demolition as well. Next slide, please. And here's the back corner. Next slide, please. And the other side. Next slide, please. So here are the elevations, and I'm going to turn it over to Eileen for review.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Eileen Graff, for Architects. So as those photos helped convey, you can get a sense of the scale of this property, you know, with the 1 story, with low to the grade, to the sand. So the idea of attaching or building on top of, et cetera, would be really difficult, especially with the requirements with FEMA and then building codes, simply that it would be very difficult to do this within the percentage of increase in value. So thus, this 797 square foot cottage is now going to be raised, and then we would like to put a new construction house on piles that would conform to FEMA standards. Maybe go to the next slide, please. So here, what we're doing is with this is BE 17, just to give reference to where we are in the flood zone. So we really have to lift this up a fair amount, and we're taking the opportunity to provide parking underneath the structure. As Attorney Mia mentioned, we are going from 2-bedroom to 3-bedroom, and that's with one of those bedrooms is going to serve the in-law. And that we are going to do on the first floor with access with an elevator. So, and going back to the parking underneath, we provided 3 spots for the 3 cars. And then of course there's driveway as well, but mainly just sort of providing the protected coverage for the cars underneath the building. So that first level houses the in-law apartment, and actually that one is only 627 square feet as an in-law unit. And then the top floor will be for the primary residence, if you will, using a little bit of the first floor for a guest bedroom, but otherwise they will live on the top floor, and while creating some outdoor space up on the roof with the head house. So with the separation when you're on the top floor, the idea of maintaining some sort of outdoor connection to the ground level is a little difficult. So we created that opportunity up above. You know, as far as architecturally, you know, our goal was to stay seaside and coastal. We've got some large overhangs to help manage the strong sun out there. We've got materials of high-end windows, high insulated windows. We've got shingles and some vertical boarding as well to sort of play into the coastal type of architecture we see out there. What we now create is 2,210 square feet of a residence in a rather compact footprint. As Lisa mentioned, we stayed generally right on top of where the existing house is, but sort of squeezed it from front to back in order to work with the property proportions. But again, no, everything conforms except for the lot size. With that, I will, close out of the architectural explanation, but happy to answer any questions should any members have it.
Thank you, Eileen, and I do stand corrected, I said 697, but it's 627 square feet for the in-law. I would also, just add on to, something Eileen talked about, rehab. So one of the conditions on the island is that you can't, this is a FEMA requirement, you can't rehabilitate a structure that doesn't meet the FEMA construction standards, by more than 50% of the value of the structure. The value of this structure is $103,500. So that means you couldn't rehab it more than $51,500, which of course doesn't go very far on a structure of this nature. Additionally, just to pick up on what Eileen said, the lot will have 82% of open space after this is done, when the requirement is a minimum of 35, and it will have 11.4% lot coverage when the maximum is 20%. So when she said we were really squeezing it down, it is bigger certainly than what's there today, but it is very compact in nature as compared to the lot for sure. So the standard for the proposed changes, if you go to the next slide, please. The standard for the proposed changes, the POD, is that the proposed changes will not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood or the POD than the pre-existing structure, and that the proposed changes cannot cause the structure to be within 10 feet of the side lot line or more than 2 stories or more than 35 feet in height. Here, the term substantially, we should all remember, means to a great or significant extent. And when used in the context of the ordinance, the board would have to find that the proposal significantly or greatly detracts from the PIOD or the neighborhood. The property's neighborhood consists primarily of 1 to 3 story large single-family homes along Northern Boulevard, all within the PIOD, and other similar homes, varying homes along 56th Street, which we'll go through in a little bit. Most homes are more densely clustered and occupy a larger portion of their lot. Obviously, this is a double lot, hence the lower, or the more open space, if you will, and the lower lot coverage. Notably, the neighborhood consists of many newly constructed homes that are raised to conform to the building code and performance standards. These homes are consistently sized and sited on their lots in order to comply with the ordinance as well. And they include roof decks, obviously, to enjoy the views on the island. Here, the proposed home matches the same style of a number of new homes on the island, including the raised and open level below the first floor, which of course are required under the FEMA flood standards, as well as the Conservation Commission performance standards. The exterior siding uses shingles and other natural wooden details matching the neighborhood's coastal aesthetic and traditional yet updated 2/1 windows, as Eileen commented. It's an improvement over most lots on the neighborhood. However, in an improvement over most lots in the neighborhood, however, the property is significantly larger, as I said. The proposed home therefore does not overwhelm the space that it is within. The remaining open space will receive native plants, according to the Conservation Commission standards, in order to stabilize the dune areas. So the proposed project also fulfills, therefore, that it reduces damage to the public and private property by floodwaters, ensuring public safety by reducing threats to life and property in the event of a significant storm event, and preventing the occurrence of public emergencies resulting from water contamination and pollution due to flooding as well, by lifting it up and getting rid of that solid foundation and solid block on the sand. Raising the home will meet the Conservation Commission standards as well as the FEMA requirements. And as I noted, it's still within the FAR. It goes from 16.5 to 23.4. The second part of the PIOD requires dimensional minimums to be met. And here, the project will not cause it to be within 10 feet of any property line, as I pointed out earlier, it's all, you go to the next slide, Caitlin, it's all within the 20-foot requirement. Next, the proposed home is 2 stories tall, even though it's raised up, it's still 2 stories. It doesn't exceed the height requirements of 35 feet, it's below that at 31.5. The project removes one controllable nonconformity, which is the front yard setback. Otherwise, the lot area is what it is, and the project therefore meets all of the other dimensional requirements. So here is, before I go through the in-law requirements, here's the current property. It's actually this lot and the one next to it that's empty, but my map's like focuses in on one lot depending on how they are. So it's the 2 lots together. And you can see the other area structures in the area that we're going to show you photos of. So we show you photos of pretty much the entire area of 58th and 56th Street, some on Northern Boulevard and some on Shore. Next street, next slide, please. So here's 156th Street, and it's 2-story, next slide. And 155 Northern, still more traditional. Next slide. And 556th Street, which is next door, next slide. And 11 and 13 56th Street. Next slide. 12 56th Street. It's a gambrel, next slide. 14 56th Street. That structure could not be built today, given the requirements. Next slide. 16 56th Street, that's kind of the more traditional cottage if they haven't updated yet. Next slide, please. 756th Street, 17 56th Street, excuse me. Next slide, please. 21 56th Street. Next slide. 1 Shore, is that right on the basin? This is the end of 56th Street. Next slide, please. 1158th Street, it's a cottage. Next slide. 858th Street, it's been lifted somewhat. There's a different elevation there. It's got glass around the bottom. Next slide, would you do that? 758, obviously built under more current standards. Next slide. 161 Northern, again, built up. Next slide, please. 654, so it's up on filings as well. Next slide. 854. Next slide. And 1254. Looking down, that's on the opposite street. Next slide. And 1654. Next slide. And 166 Northern and 357. So those are the end of the street. Next slide. So the applicant also proposes to build a 627 square foot in-law apartment within the new home, included in the above square footage. So it is a part of the overall square footage. Therefore, the applicant needs a special permit for an in-law. So the requirements of the in-law are that the in-law is occupied by parents, grandparents, children, or grandchildren. And this in-law will be occupied by Steve's parents, Alfred and Priscilla Marshall. The dimensional requirements of the zoning ordinance are otherwise met. Here, the property is currently pre-existing non-conforming, but otherwise for lot area, everything else meets the required dimensional requirements. The gross floor area of the in-law apartment shall not exceed 700 square feet if it is new construction, and that is far as below that. In this instance, it's 627 square feet. The zoning board may impose reasonable conditions, granting a special permit, including the number of parking spaces, but you have to have 1 for the in-law. So as Eileen pointed out, there will be 3 spaces altogether. All safety, health, and building codes are met, and those will be met. In order to become effective, the special permit granted under this section has to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. It will be recorded, as you know, or can't commence until a recorded permit is filed with the city also. And then in the 11th and 23rd months following the grant or renewal of the special permit, the homeowner has to certify under pains and penalties of perjury that it still exists and complies. The applicant will comply with this requirement. And then the permit will expire if it's not filed accordingly, or if it ceases to be occupied by the residents that are required in the first condition. And at the expiration of 3 years from its granting, unless it is renewed by this board. The applicant agrees with these terms. Where there are new kitchens or kitchen appliances that have been added, they have to be removed within 6 months of expiration of the special permit. The applicant agrees with those terms. And the zoning board of appeals may order an inspection of the premises for compliance upon reasonable notice. And the applicant, of course, agrees to those terms. We've also provided 4 letters of support. One from 12. One from 1756. One from 1356. One from 1256. And one from 5 Shore, which is at the end of the street. I'm informed that the most immediate abutter at 11, that would be on the right-hand side of the house, lives out of state, and that's used as an Airbnb. I'm informed that 5, which is on the opposite side, is also a rental. The owner is not available, but is in Florida. And I am informed that the house directly across the street at 6 is also a rental. The owner is not present. And that's all I have for my presentation, Mr. Chair, and we
Very good.
request the board grant those permits.
Thank you, Attorney Mead. We'll close that portion of the public hearing and go to public comment. Anyone in the room who wishes to be heard, just kindly raise your hand. Anyone? Yes, please.
So we own the 656, and it's not a rental, it's a family common.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I was informed.
Right, I am, I just wanted to clarify.
Very good. Your name, please, ma'am.
Tracy Crawford?
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Was that it, Ms. Crawford?
Yes.
Okay, anyone else wish to be heard? In the room, going once, going twice, all right, anyone online, of the 4 attendees that we see online? Anyone who wishes to be heard, just kindly raise your hand. Seeing none, I will close the public comment portion and go to questions from the board, beginning with Mr. Swanton. And we can take them both at the same time, so feel free to sort of envelop your questions as to either the special permit for non-conformities as well as the special permit.
Could you put up the elevation? Well, Attorney Mead, I just had a question. My first question is, obviously it's a little house now and it's kind of grown up much taller.
Right.
And I think you had said the FEMA regulations require that if they do more than 50% improvement, they have to put it up on stilts, basically.
That's
Is that
correct. 50, more than 50% of the value of the existing structure, not the lot, the
The land,
structure.
right, which is only hundreds of roughly.
$103,500.
So this obviously exceeds that, so that's part of the reason it's grown, because it had to go, every house on Plum Island that makes that kind of improvement needs to go up.
That's correct.
Okay. I think, the little head house on top, as I understand it, that's actually a stairwell, right? It's not,
I'm gonna
like-
let Eileen address that.
it's not a bathroom, right?
No, it's not yet.
I think of a head,
Yeah,
Correct, that's strictly the stair access to the rooftop,
Okay.
and that's it.
That's all it is, and I guess we have a stipulation in our zoning bylaw that if it's less than 10% of the footprint, we don't count it.
Right.
If it's just a stairwell, so that's why even though the building appears to be quite a bit higher, that we don't really count that piece, right?
Correct.
Okay. This is a larger lot than we often see for a house, and you did manage to stay within the FAR, which to me is commendable, despite its growth. So I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett?
I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chan.
Yeah, I have a couple. I think it's the plot plan shows, I think it's to the left side of the house, there's a candy cane, which is labeled as a vent. And then when the house is built over it, it still says vent. What is that?
I don't know, can you, where, do you know what that is?
That candy cane, that's
I mean, I
the,
know what the candy cane is, but I don't know where it says then.
See where it says vent on the
yeah,
left side?
plan. I
So,
think it's
and I know the
gonna be-
house is stilted, so the vent is below it, but can you build a house over a vent?
So that's that's the vent for the sewer system.
Are they gonna just relocate it?
I don't think you can, it's
No.
venting the system based on the underground, the underground piping,
I mean,
so.
maybe you are. Well,
Can I just approach Mr.?
Oh, yeah, of course, by all means.
Where, but I don't see it, where,
okay, so right there, she's circling, it says vent.
oh.
So the house is built over the vent. If you go to the drawing above it, it's out in the yard.
That can't be the candy cane, they wouldn't have it in the middle of the lot, the candy canes are all up by the street.
Well, look at, do the pictures of the house. So it might
Yeah, you
be
can see it
slide
more.
7
Yeah.
or 8. Going down. Here's the candy cane, is it, oh, keep going, one more. There it is, there's a candy cane. And you're gonna put the house right over it. I mean, maybe it's allowed, but it seems like you wouldn't wanna vent underneath the house, but I don't know.
Well, it's gotta be lifted, I mean, we have to comply with zoning, so if that's a problem, we're gonna have to come back. But,
Okay. It just
you know,
seems
the
like.
house
it ought to
is,
be-
it's, what's the height of the,
Of 8 feet underneath.
yes,
Yeah,
it's
it's 8
8 feet underneath, so
Yeah.
you can have coverage.
Okay, and then the second question I had is, looks like the building without the head house is 31 feet. Just in kind of looking around the area, that seems to be, that'll be the tallest house in the area.
Except for the newer constructed houses.
And I think the closest one would be back on Northern Boulevard, that looks like it's 32, 33. Is that the closest tall house? Like, there are none on 56, right? By tall, I mean,
Yeah, I
they
don't,
exceed 25 feet.
yeah, I don't think, I think you're correct, Mr. Chandler, I don't think there's any on Highlands right on 56, go ahead.
Not on 56, on 58.
Because that's also the tallest pilings in the area, right? Most of them are 4 to 6 feet.
I can only speak to one that I know.
Okay.
58, because I did it. And it's exactly the same in elevation.
So it's 8 feet above grade.
8 feet above grade to allow the parking underneath, and then the typical 6 ceiling heights per floor. That one did not have a head house because they did a door lift instead, but has the same railing system up above.
It's just in driving around, most of the stilts are shorter. I know you're being forced into stilts again.
Right,
Caitlin, could you go to that photo, please? I
50.
think it's in the middle, right there.
so this is Ryan Clemens from my office, sorry about, there we go.
So not only is this one a similar height, minus the head house, which you can't really see from this angle.
Right.
But it's higher up on the hill on 58th Street, so
Which is
it
one
will
street
be over 56, over to the post house. And then if you go a couple photos down, there's also, I believe it's 854th. View up. One right above that.
That's it.
Oh, then it must be 654. Yes. This one is also of that similar height. It's also raised up considerably high on pilings.
Yeah.
And it's directly behind the property, so they will be matching in size.
Okay,
And I
Thank
can
you.
comment on that because that's a pitched one. So imagine you have a drive under level. You have a first floor, a second floor,
And
and
then-
an attic space.
and a peak
So
roof,
it's
yeah.
actually in massing that, in my opinion, appears larger in massing compared to a flat.
That's all the questions I had. Chair.
Thank you, Beginner. Please.
What was the height on the stairwell at the very top of the house?
The head house,
Yes.
So We just have to provide, headroom in order to access, so we kept it pretty low, I think it was 7 foot. If you use the door as a reference point on that head house there, I have a dimension line, because the city wanted something to demonstrate. If we could hone in on that top right drawing, Caitlin, 9 to the top, and using that door as a reference plate, which is a 6'8" door. So we just did the bare minimum to get up for access and nothing more. So
And this is for folks to get up to the roof deck. Okay, so that puts you 40 feet tall. All right, so I have some of the same concerns that it is going to be the tallest house in the area. But again, we don't have any neighbors that are complaining about it. But it is gonna look much different than its surrounding neighbors, for sure. But let's talk about the in-law a little bit. So it sounds like the in-law is gonna have a full appliances, like a stove?
Oh, yeah, it's an in-law apartment, so in-law apartments are allowed to have living, we have I don't think I put the floor plans there on there.
Yeah.
So we have the floor plan, so, let's see if we can get to the floor plan. There we go. So on the yellow and the top left, that's the in-law apartment. So you'll see it has a little, condensed kitchen, a bathroom, a bedroom, and like a living space.
Now, you had talked about some permitting, and there was some 3 years.
Yes.
You were going fast on that.
I'm
but-
sorry.
So I can understand how this might not turn into an apartment or a
Correct.
double Airbnb or something in the future. So what are the safeguards?
Right, so the safeguards are in the ordinance, and they're actually, I have to say, finally, after years of having this, starting to be kept track of and enforced. Mr. Swan maybe doesn't completely agree with that, but in any event, what the ordinance says is, obviously, we have the permit from here, we have to report it with the building department as well. And then it after, the special permit will expire if the certification isn't filed, or if the in-law ceases to be occupied as provided by the ordinance, or at the expiration of 3 years, unless they come back for a renewal. They have to come back here for a renewal, or if it stops being used as an in-law, within 6 months, the kitchen facilities have to be removed. So that's part of it. Also, the zoning board of appeals may order an inspection of the premises for compliance hereunder at any time upon reasonable notice to the homeowner. So if you get all these complaints that, you know, the original occupants aren't there anymore and it's being used as a B&B, this actually gives you the right to go in there, which you wouldn't necessarily otherwise have without absent a court order.
What is the policing mechanism on the 3 years? I'm referring to the chair.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So it's the internal docketing of each of these permits, but there's no, tickler system that will necessarily alert an applicant, but their rights would expire in the absence of their affirmative step to renew it and come before us. They might have to come back completely, de novo, like all over again from the get-go. Which, tends to be an embedded deterrent, but I'm not aware, and Caitlin, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not aware that, there isn't sort of like a running docket system for us to let us know when these things are coming up. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I mean, you're new, they're supposed to come back here every 3 years. We have quite a few of them in town.
Yes.
I think I've seen one come back in the last 4 years.
Kent Street, my client.
Okay, good. But I mean, it's pretty rare. That is something that'd be nice if it just happened with a tickler system and maybe didn't, could just have the zoning enforcement officer check, every 3 years kind of thing. But it's.
The other catch, Mr. Swanton, the other catch is on sale. So you all approved or reapproved on Phillips Drive a few meetings ago, an in-law.
That's right.
And those people purchased that house. It had an in-law that expired. And because they wanted to exercise it again, they came in and got a new in-law for you. So sometimes it is caught on resale, as
Right.
Mr. Chiampetti can attest to.
For sure. So it's not necessarily just a rigorous honor system, you know, but there seems to be a few other sort of catch points. Sure. Though imperfect, but not completely absent. Any other questions from the board?
No, sir.
Great. I don't have any either, so we'll close that portion of the public hearing and go right into deliberations. We can deliberate. Let's do deliberations for both, and then we'll take any motions separately, of course. So why don't we begin, Mr. Swanton? We can start deliberations again, special permit for non-conformities as well as the special permit.
Yeah, I drove around there today. It's a beautiful day to be on Plum Island driving around. And this is clearly, it's mostly smaller homes, and this is clearly, much bigger. There's one similar to it on the next street over, it's already been mentioned, on 58th Street. So that kind of gave me pause. On the other hand, this is a larger lot than many. And they do have to go up on stilts if they're gonna do anything, pretty much, to take advantage of a larger lot and have a place where the in-laws can be. And they managed to stay within the FAR, which is, not everybody does that. Some people try to go even bigger, and that to me is a plus. So, it's, I think because of the extra space there and because of, there's been a butter support, I haven't heard any complaints from a butters. It's not as clear cut as some other things, but on balance, I can support the special permit to build this building. A question, the in-law apartment, I can let somebody else go into the criteria there more, but I mean, it is an in-law or a parent, so it fits, and it fits the size. And I don't think it's, it all fits within the building. There's parking. I don't have an issue with that either, so I can support both sides of this.
Very good. Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, well, I think we always struggle with projects on Plum Island. This is another one. That's because in many ways the horse is out of the barn and trying to regulate out there under our existing tools is a rather challenging task. As I've said before, if there's any consistent architectural theme or building theme, size theme on Plum Island, it's that there is none. And we have in front of us a large lot, a well-designed building, in-law apartment that meets the regulations, and a structure that meets all of the dimensional requirements, including height, including FAR, except for lot size, which can't do anything about. Writing on a clean slate, regulating development of Block Island, I'm not sure that I would approve this, but certainly given the character of the island, what's been going on in terms of development, the need to put structures on stilts to gain height, we're gonna see this again and again and again, which makes sense. And this is the tableau that we're painting on or drawing on, so I can approve it.
Very good. Mr. Chen?
Do you want one of us to go over the 5 and 9 prongs for the in-law requirement?
We've always had that down pat.
I can read.
We can articulate it out loud, or, however you choose to sort of deliberate.
Is that why?
We're ducking that.
You left it to me? Think I'm a reader?
They've left all the prongs to you.
Okay.
Larry.
The star of the show.
I guess I'll start by saying I can support both applications. I think the special permit for the new building I can approve. I am concerned with the height, but I understand that, they're also stuck with an 8-foot jump right off the bat by putting it on pilings or stilts, which hurts any design if you're gonna do a 2-story building. And as for the in-law apartment, I can support it, and I'll go over the 14 prongs, so that they're in the record. The first one is the in-law apartment will be occupied by parents, grandparents, children, or grandchildren, by blood or by marriage, and the applicant has indicated it's parents. Dimensional requirements of zoning are otherwise met or attached, and the property is pre-existing non-conforming. The gross floor area of the in-law apartment shall not exceed 900 square feet or 700 if it's new, and I think we said it was 627.
Right, 627.
The board may impose reasonable conditions granting a special permit, including the number of parking spaces, except there should be a minimum of 1 for the in-law, and it sounds like we've got plenty of parking. They have 2, and it actually looks like you could put 4 or 5 cars on there. Safety, health, and building codes will be met. Yes, they will be met. Okay, and now, those were the first 5 prongs for the special criteria. Now, to determine the applicant projects meets specific criteria of section 10H7. Number 1, the use requested is listed in the table of use regulations or elsewhere in the ordinance requiring a special permit in the district for which the application is made, or is similar in character to the permitted uses of a particular district, but is not specifically mentioned. Proposed in-law use requires a special permit from the zoning board of appeals, which is either here. Requested use is essential and or desirable for the public conveyance of welfare. The answer is the proposed use is essential or desirable to the public convenience of welfare. Newburyport has a need for various types of housing, including in-law apartments. The requested use will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impaired pedestrian safety. The requested use is expected to have negligible impacts on existing traffic. The requested use will not overload any public water, drainage, sewer, or any other municipal systems to such an extent that the requested use of any developed use in the immediate area for which the area of the city will be unduly subjected to hazards affecting health, safety, or general welfare. The requested use is compatible with the surrounding areas. The requested use will not overload public water, drainage, or sewer systems of any municipal system. And I think it's 3-bedroom, right?
3-bedroom.
It'll end up being a
Yeah.
3-bedroom, and that's allowed. As it applies to the sewer system. Any special regulations for the use set forth in the special permit table are fulfilled. And indeed, the special regulations for use set forth in the permit shall be fulfilled. The requested use will not impair the integrity or character of the district or adjoining districts, nor be detrimental to the health and welfare. And it will not impair the integrity or character of the district or adjoining districts. 3 to go. The requested use will not, by its addition to a neighborhood, cause an excess of that particular use that could be detrimental to the character of said neighborhood. This proposed use will not cause any excess of that particular use that would be detrimental to the character of this neighborhood, specifically the Hyod. The proposed use is in harmony with the purpose and the intent of the zoning ordinance, and it is consistent with the proposed use and intent of the NZO, Newburyport zoning ordinance. And lastly, the proposed use shall not be conducted in a manner as to admit any dangerous, noxious, injurious, or otherwise objectionable fire, explosion, radioactive, or other hazardous noise, vibration, smoke, dust, odor, or other form of environmental pollution. That's impossible to abide by all that.
Yeah, no,
As it is demonstrated in the application for special permit, the proposed use shall not be conducted in a manner as to admit any dangerous, noxious, injurious, or otherwise objectionable fire, explosion, radioactive, or other hazard, noise, or vibration, smoke, dust, odor, or any other form of environmental pollution. And with that said, I can support the in-law apartment.
Could you repeat though, Kate?
Come on, number 5, you wanna go back to
It's a
5?
tedious and laborious exercise, and I appreciate you doing it. We all do. And with equal apology to the audience, and we have to go through this criteria, so thank you for your indulgence. Mr. Ginta.
Sure. I think when we see a house this tall, it sort of sets us back on our heels a little bit and you're like, wow, that's a big house. You know, you have concerns about the neighbors, but then the neighbors have not expressed any concerns. And when we kind of talk about the future of Plum Island, I actually think this house represents what the future of Plum Island is going to look like. Because all the houses, as they continue to be renovated, are gonna look like this. So it's the first of its kind of on this street, if you will, but there'll be many more, I'm sure, over the years that will look like this. As far as the in-law goes, I think the in-law apartment's a good idea, and it's always a good idea to keep family together. It meets all the criteria, and the whole policing thing is me just learning as a new member of how this all works, and that sounds like that's a discussion for another time of how these things are policed in the future. But I support both of these.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ginta. You know, I too am struck by, as is the experience of this board, anything having to do with Plum Island usually will raise the very energized, oftentimes ire and opposition, or at least concern of folks in the immediate surroundings. The fact that we have every abutter that's notified, whether they're present in the Commonwealth or living, you know, elsewhere, they're no less an owner wherever they might lay their head. So their right to speak or offer their input or any criticism or concern can be leveled from anywhere, and we hear nothing. So that silence tells me quite a bit as well, just in experience. So I think it's a thoughtful design, not to reuse that language, but it is the performance criteria under FEMA is, you know, a shield and a sword, and it is unfortunately the geometry within which any alteration on in a dune resource area, in a special fragile resource area such as Plum Island has to conform with and comply with. It's always a creative exercise of almost, creative gymnastics to find a way to accomplish multiple goals. And I think this is a sensitive way to do it. I like the design. I have a lot of confidence in the designers and the thought leadership behind this application. Gives me some confidence in just my experience, so I too can support it. I appreciate the time walking us through all of that detail as well. Any further deliberations? Yeah.
Chair, I noticed, we've done this before with in-law apartments. We draft a special condition with the motion that it will not be used as a separate dwelling unit, nor as a short-term rental unit. I
Well,
assume.
it is gonna be a separate dwelling.
It's a separate dwelling unit, but not a short-term
Yeah.
rental.
Okay, so we should
One of
say,
those.
I guess when we've done it before, it must have been when it was standalone. So we can say just that, not as a short-term rental unit.
We can, I mean, we can, it's all about enforcement, honestly, and, at the end of the day, it's belt and suspenders, so if whomever is making the motion, if you are so inclined, it's
Okay.
there's nothing at all wrong with that, and it is, it's extra doubly clear that this was the mind of the board. If anyone in the future is ever looking back, trying to understand, what did we know, what did we think, what were we working with, and where did we land? That language makes it pretty clear, I think. So,
Yeah, special conditions at least get recorded,
absolutely, no,
whereas the minutes you have to go search for them.
oh, there's no question, I agree with you on that. Any further deliberations?
I just want to make one more
Yes.
comment. I agree, that this is perhaps the future of the development we're gonna see on stilts and things, but unlike most houses in the neighborhood, this one has a much bigger lot, so many of them will be a lot smaller.
Yeah,
Unless they exceed the FAR, which is why I was very happy to see that, although they have a larger lot to work. So high, but smaller. Anyway, I'm sorry.
no, you're right, I mean, it's, when you sort of think about this in terms of an expression of fraction, the numerator is bigger because there's a double lot, and that's going to always give and yet notwithstanding that, it's still very, sensitively executed and doesn't sprawl across both lots and creates as much preservation of open space in my estimation as is doable.
Right.
Notwithstanding the protection of, protected species of, flora and fauna that may be on that other lot anyway. The reality is it's still, it's still a challenge. So the execution of this is always going to be very case by case, but I appreciate that detail, Ken. Any further deliberations? And if not, do we have a motion to approve in a second? A motion with a condition, if there is.
I'll make a motion. Well, do you want to do
Let's
this?
do-
Add
yeah,
two
let's-
separate motions?
Please, let's do the special permit for non-conformities first, and we'll just.
Okay, so that's ZNC 24-8. I make a motion to approve it as submitted.
Great. Any condition?
No condition on that
Oh,
one, because that's the building.
Got it. Mr. Ginta second. So motion's made by Mr. Shannon and seconded by Mr. Ginta, calling the roll. Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yeah.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Ginta.
Yes.
Rob Champetti, I vote yes. That's 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. Motion carries, and the special permit for non-conformities is approved. We have a motion on the application for a special permit on 24-3.
I'll make a motion to approve ZSP 24-3 for the in-law apartment with a special condition that the unit will not be used as a short-term rental unit.
Second.
Very good. Motion made by Mr. Shannon and seconded by Mr. Ginta with the special condition. Calling the roll. Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
And Mr. Ginta.
Yes.
Rob Champetti, I vote yes. That is 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. Motion carries. And the special permit with the condition is also approved. Thank you very much for your time and for your patience for all those still waiting for their doctor's appointment to be called, right? Thank you guys very much for your presentation. I do see that we have Mr. Becker online, but I'm going to, just in the spirit, before I bring that one forward, that was, I believe, 5 Wilson Way. We're going to go into the next application, which is the last one, because I suspect it's live in the room. That is the application of Timothy Switzerman. Did I say that correctly?
Swearsman,
Okay, thank you. What was it?
Swearsman.
Swerdman, Timothy Swerdman, and Alexandra Rada, care of Lisa Mead, Tellerman and Costa. This is the application of 311 Merrimack Street. This is a special permit to remove several areas of exterior wall, as well as construct a small addition on the rear of the westerly side of the structure. Attorney Mead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Lisa Mead, Telemann Costa, 30 Green Street in Newburyport. And with me this evening is Mr. Swarsman. And our architect on this project is MPG Design, but they're not present tonight, and neither is Alexandra. You go to the next slide, please. So as the chair indicated, this is a project at 311 Merrimack Street, which until recently has been used as a 2-family home for a long period of time. We can talk about that in a minute. Tim and Alexandra intend to convert this home to 2-family use. That's how they're using it right now. To a single-family use from the 2-family, and make renovations to the rear of the home, obviously, in addition to the interior. Because the 2-story screened-in porch at the rear is part of the historic structure, and due to its poor condition, will need to be partially removed, coupled with some other minor modifications at the rear. This puts the project into a DCOD special permit. And we'll go over that in a minute. The property is located in the R2 zoning district and the DCOD district under the ordinance. The applicant proposes to remove 29.5% of the exterior walls, which, as I said, includes removing and then rebuilding that 2-story screened-in porch. The applicant is adding, notwithstanding that, adding only 328 square feet of living space, which you're going to see in a minute. And I will tell you that I have been working with Tim and Alexandra for over a year, maybe.
Yeah, probably like a year and a half.
Yeah, like a year and a half, as they have been very methodical and careful at how they redesign the back of this house so as not to do anything inappropriate to the historic structure located at the front of the house. And they have been very specific and careful about how to do that by using basically a scalpel and making it happen. So the following, as I said earlier, you can go to the next slide, please. The property is non-conforming. It has frontage on both Merrimack and Howard Street. That's up in the back. You're gonna see that in a minute. It contains 26,600 square feet, or a minimum of 10,000 square feet are required. The frontage on Merrimack Street is 76.8 feet, and on Howard Street is 54.82, where 90 feet is required. It's non-conforming for the side yard setback as it encroaches into the west side yard. This non-conformity existed at least as early as 1914, which we'll show you in a minute, before zoning was adopted in Newburyport in 1940. Setback for the right side of the structure is 4.3 feet. That's on the historic structure. That too has been there for quite some time. Single-family use in the R2 district requires a 10-foot side yard setback. Otherwise, the property meets all of the zoning requirements. There is also, by the way, an accessory garage that doesn't meet setback requirements, but we're not doing anything to the accessory garage. So, because this is a DOD special permit, we are required to provide to the board, as we did with the Historic Commission, a history of the house, which I always find fascinating. It's one of my favorite parts about all of this. So this is a federal style structure that was constructed around 1807. It is listed as contributory on the district data sheets. According to the title, the Form B, Stephen Coffin Dutton, a shipbuilder, purchased the property from Moses Moody in 1804. The Form B suggests that Dutton subsequently built a structure on the land in 1806. However, he sold the property to Captain Thomas Follinsby. And then the deed from Dutton to Follinsby does not mention a building. So the first mention of a dwelling house actually exists in 1812, when the deed from Captain Follinsby went to John Brown. So sometime between 06 and 12, a structure was constructed. Dutton came to own the property again in 1820, when he purchased the property from John Brown. The deed from Brown to Dutton again references the dwelling house, so we know it existed. According to the Form B, Dutton then sold the property to Samuel Noyes in 1839, who owned the house, followed by his heirs into the 19th century. Tim and Alexander bought the house in November of 21. As for the history of the owners of the property in regard to Dutton, the history of Newburyport by John James Currier provides that Dutton built ships in the area near Mowbridge's Point. And one ship Dutton built was called the Callistio, and it was one of the best built vessels that ever sailed from the Merrimack River, according to Mr. Currier. Dutton also built the ship Jacob Jones, the ship registering 545 tons with 20 guns. And that was according to the municipal history of Essex County. Dutton was listed obviously as a shipbuilder after the close of the Revolutionary era. Captain Follinsby, the owner of the property for a period of time after Dutton, mastered a number of ships in Newburyport and was a member of the Marine Society. The history of the Marine Society in Newburyport lists Captain Follinsby as a merchant engaged in privateering during the Revolutionary War. Follinsby was the master of the schooner Flora during that time, and at some time after September of 1794, he was captured while commanding the Flora. During the same war, he was again captured by a French privateer on January 8, 1799, while commanding the ship Two Sisters. A newspaper article in December of 1873 in the Newburyport Herald talks about a bequest from one of Follinsby's youngest daughters to the Marine Society, mentioning Follinsby was a highly esteemed and prominent shipmaster whose name for many years was connected with the prosperous commerce in Newburyport and the Marine Society. It is unclear when the house was converted to a two-family use. It does appear like that as far back as 1969 in the assessor's records. So I think that telling this story over time, and to the extent we do, sheds some light on the property itself. But what I also want to show you is how the structure evolved over a period of time, because I think that that will tell you and help explain the condition of this rear porch. So if you go to the next slide, please. So here is the current, assessor's plan. And you can see the structure, kind of to the top on Merrimack Street. And you see how, that rear porch is at the very edge. So if you go to the next slide, please. This is the 1914 assessor's map, and you see there's this thing attached to the back of the structure. So that's from 1914, and then it goes to the 1924 map. Next slide. Again, you can still see there's a thing attached to the rear of the structure. Sometime, obviously, after 1924 and before more recently, but before 1969, that thing on the back was taken off. And whether taking that off did what you're gonna see to the structure as pulling away from the house, or whether when they took that back addition off and they reconstructed this porch, and you're gonna see it's on a slab that goes anywhere from 1 inch to 2.5 inches thick. They kind of put this porch on. It wasn't constructed to last. And so that's what we're looking to take off. Next slide, please. So we have provided a letter of conditions from Gelinas Structural Engineering about the condition of the porch, and I'm going to show you some photos in a minute. But Gelinas says the porch is unsafe and must be rebuilt. It says specifically, quote, the porch foundation and structural area must be removed and replaced in their entirety. It is insufficient structural integrity here to accommodate any change. The existing foundation and structure are not adequate or code compliant, as is the formal loadings, as is for formal loadings as well. You're going to be able to see from the photographs that there is not a proper foundation under the 2-story porch. Even if it were left as a porch, the slab is anywhere from 1 inch to 2.5 inches thick. The photographs are going to show the porch is sloping and pulling away from the house. If indeed it was later removed and then something was added to it, some kind of pull away happened and it wasn't constructed properly. Or maybe those additions on the back were kind of haphazardly done and this was left, but it wasn't left well. According to Tim and Alex, they are so concerned about the integrity of the porch, they will not use it, and they're careful not to let their children wander out onto it on the 2nd floor. And the applicants, experts, and consultants have found that the porch is unsafe, not safely usable in its current condition, and is in need of significant repairs, all of which require this DCOD special permit. So we go to the next slide, please. So here are photographs. So here is this is the slab that you can see with the tape measure. So it's anywhere from 1 inch to 2.5 inches, depending on where you are. You can see the edge of, this is the porch. So it's not huge on the back of the house. And you can see clearly where there's a corner board on the edge of that porch, which connected it to the house. So it's unclear when that porch was built, but it's not safe now and it wasn't built well. And you're gonna see photos of the concrete cracking all the way around and splitting off, like under that corner near the downspout. Next slide, please. Again, we have cracks in the foundation or the slab, if you will, all around the foundation. And that is the result of the weight of the 2-story porch and leaning away from the house. Next slide, please. Again, here are some photographs inside the porch. You can see how it was added on. You've got the sideboards there on the back. So you know that somehow it was added on, but kind of as a second thought. Next slide, please. Here again, you can see the other side of the porch. You can see it leaning down and sinking, so to speak. You can see the undersized beams that are used for the construction as well. And you see some of the cracks that are happening on the overhang on the top. Next slide, please. This roof doesn't match anything either. It's kind of a shed roof that was thrown on there. So here you can see some other photographs of the inside of the house, porches that leans out, and the materials that were used to construct it on. And again, you can see the outside siding, clearly how it was added on. Next slide, please. And then with the level, you can see how it's sloping away from the house as it falls away into the slab that is not holding it up any longer because there's no footings or foundation. Next slide, please. So here are the proposed plans. And this is just a cover sheet, but you can get an idea. So here's the front of this house. Nothing is happening in the upper left-hand photograph. Nothing is happening to this view of this house at all. In fact, the porch is behind that little L bump out there and into the back of the house. You're not even gonna see it from Merrimack Street. On the drawing on the right, this is what it's gonna look like afterwards. You have a roof that matches the rest of the roof lines. And you can see it doesn't extend out beyond that little bump out on the side, so it's all tucked in to the back. Next slide, please. And here is the site plan. If you could blow up the footprint of the house, Caitlin. So really here are where the changes are happening in the rear. So you've got the porch that's coming off, that's gonna be rebuilt. That's a significant part of the calculation. Then you have a little area that's gonna be built on the left-hand side of that rear addition that's in peach. That covers up some of the sidewalls, that's another part of it. And then there's a little square that's gonna have a second floor bit on. So the 328 new square feet are all in those little squares. So next slide, please. So here's the footprint, and I don't always bring these in, but this was used to help do the calculations, so you can see what's being added. So you have the porch, which is the largest part of the renovation. And then you can see the two little other areas that are gonna be added on the right-hand side. One is a new roof, that's gonna become a little, not a deck, but like a sitting area outside. And then you've got the little square on the top that is gonna go up and become an addition. Next slide, please. Again, so this is better because you can see the new roof. So the porch area is gonna have a new roof. And then there's a new roof on the first floor for the balcony. That's why I couldn't think of that word, for the balcony. And then the new roof on the addition that you're gonna see in a minute in the elevations. But this roof line picture helps define those areas. Next slide, please. So here we go. This is the rear. And so where the porch was, you see that bank of 3 windows, 2 over 2. And then you see the little balcony which has the new roof underneath it. In the back of that is the little addition that was put on to carry out that second floor out a little bit. And that's it. Now, what you're gonna find also that's really interesting about this house that the Historic Commission thought was kind of humorous, but interesting and unique is on the right-hand side of the house, there are 2 over 2 windows. On the left-hand side of the house, there are 6 over 6 windows. That's an existing condition. So it doesn't happen all the way around the front, but in the back and on the sides, that's the way it is, and that's the way it's gonna stay. Next slide, please. So here's this is the right-hand side of the house or the westerly side of the house. And you can see the edge of the porch that's new, the balcony that's new, and then the French doors that are gonna walk out into the backyard. Next slide, please. And this is the left-hand side of the house. And so really what you see on the left-hand side of the photo, that's the porch. So you still see the corner board, and then you have the porch that's been rebuilt, and you have the roof that actually is an appropriate style to match the existing roof line of the historic structure. I will add that all the materials that are being used also are the same clapboards, cedar painted clapboards to match the existing 3D mutton windows, the appropriate corner boards to match the existing, same way with the roof lines. Next slide, please. Front of the house, no changes at all. Next slide, please. And here's the rear of the house. So you have the porch in the top and you have that shed roof that comes down off of it. And obviously that's going to go away. And then you see the new little bump out on the left-hand side in the bottom with the roof on top and the little second story bump out on the back. And those are all the changes. But because there's so much wall space, exterior wall space on that two-story porch, it bumps us up over the 25% for the DCOD. Next slide, please. And here is the west side again. I'm not sure why we have that in there twice. Next slide, please. And you can keep going. I'm not sure what we have those in. All right, and then these were the DCOD calculations. Next slide, please. And that's more the DCOD calculations. Next slide. Next slide. And one more. There we go. So here, what we tried to do is also show a rendering. So you can see what it actually would look like side by side. And here is on the left-hand side is the existing, obviously, and on the right-hand side is the proposed. So that's just to give you an idea of the dimensions. Next slide. And again, you have the left side existing and the right side proposed. And the next slide, please. And again, as you can see, looking down the driveway, we're looking out the driveway, but if you're looking down the driveway, you're not gonna be able to see it at all because of that bump out that exists on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. And here's the side, so you can see we keep that corner board to keep the separation of what the existing house was versus what the proposed new is. Here you see all the 2/2 windows that are different on the other side. But that's gonna carry through on this side. Next slide, please. And then here is the west side of the structure. Next slide, please. And again, here's the view of the house from Merrimack Street. Next slide, please. And then the rear, east facing. Next slide, please. And the rear of the house existing. Next slide. And the east side, again, a little closer up of the porch with that corner board, not quite as prominent. Next slide, please. And then this is the west side. Most of the changes will happen inside this nook, if you will. Next slide, please. Again, this is the west back of the house. You can see the 606 windows. Next slide. And that's looking down the driveway. Again, you see that bump out that prevents seeing the back of the house changing. Next slide, please. So here's 313 Merrimack Street's right next door. Next slide. And we've got 313 and 315, so you can see the streetscape down, neighborhood context. Next slide. And this is across, further down 307, 309. This is before you get to this house right here. Next slide. And 307, 309, again, the rear addition in the back on that house, this is right next door. Next slide. Again, this is right next door, so you see those, that's interesting, that's a two-family, obviously, it's got the two kind of additions on the back, but also that second bump out. Next slide. And this is across the street on Merrimack Street, the house is being redone, has a historic preservation restriction on it. Next slide, please. And we've got across the street also, you get the streetscape on the Merrimack Street side, the Merrimack River side of the street. A little bit different style of those houses. Next slide, please. It's interesting, right? On the right-hand side or the upriver side of the, not upriver, but away from the river, you've got more of the Federalist style houses. And then on the river side, you have more of the, you know, maybe they weren't the ship captains, maybe they were something else. That's a little different style of house. So that's 342 and 340. Next slide. And there's 338. That's at the apex of Merrimack Port and Merrimack Street. So we're a little further down from that. And next slide, please. So just to reiterate, from the details, the proposed plans respect the current trim and rake board of the existing house. The new wood corners match the existing, the double hung simulated windows match the existing, the painted cedar clapboards match the existing, and nothing on the street portion of the home changes. It'll be painted and repaired, but not changed. After review from the Historic Commission, I just want to quote, you should have the report, but I think it's important. They said, quote, "The proposed changes to the rear of the structure as illustrated in the plans submitted by the applicant did not strike the commission as likely to have an adverse impact on the historical values described in the report. The applicants have expressed the intent to restore the functionality of the house to a single-family use, which could be a welcome restoration." So, next slide, please. So the board from the DCOD special permit needs to decide, whether or not, well, first of all, there's more than 25% demolition, but that the portion of the structure to be demolished retains no substantial remaining market value or reasonable use, taking into account the cost of rehabilitation to meet the requirements of state building code as applies to historic buildings and structures. Here, based upon the report of the expert, the structural engineer, Delinus Engineering, that the poor condition of the later added addition to the original structure, as described above and evidenced by the photos, prohibit the reasonable use of that portion of the structure. And the construction and slab under show that it was something added onto and not a part of the original structure. Further, the amount of rehabilitation required to harmonize the failing addition with the original structure and the associated costs are not feasible. The applicant proposes to remove that existing porch and construct in its place on the same footprint a new addition, which is in keeping with the Secretary of the Interior standards. Is scale and massing the same as is, which would be proposed to be removed. It's not visible from the public realm, and it's complementary to, but not an exact duplication of the historic structure. As to the special permit conditions under Article 10H7, the use is listed in the table of use regulations in the ordinance. This is the R2 district, conforming it to a single family use that's listed by right. The two family is a pre-existing non-conforming use, but it's converting back to a single. The requested use is essential or desirable to the public convenience or welfare. Here, the ordinance allows a single family use, so you would think that that was something that was desirable to public convenience or welfare. In fact, converting it back to a single family use would be more convenient. And also as to the porch itself, removing an unsafe porch is clearly essential to public welfare, protecting the applicant and the applicant's family and visitors. The requested use will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety. Here, we're actually reducing the use intensity on the property, and so that will be reduced. The requested use will not overload public water, drainage, or sewer systems or anything of that nature. Here, again, we're proposing to reduce the use from a 2 to a single, and also nothing in the construction would have any adverse impact on any of the public services. Any special regulations for the use set forth in the special permit table are fulfilled. There are none for that use. The requested use will not impair the integrity or character of the district or adjoining districts. Certainly the use won't, and as I noted, the proposed renovations won't either. They're completely consistent with the district itself. The requested use will not, by its addition to the neighborhood, cause an excess of that particular use. This is a single family, 2-family district. That's not going to be an excess. The proposed use is in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance. Again, single family use is allowed by right. Proposed use shall not be conducted in a manner to omit any dangerous, noxious, or injurious or other objectionable activities. And of course, the renovations will not do that, nor will the single family use do that. So we believe that in addition to complying with the DCOD special permit requirements and complying with the special permit requirements in and of themselves, the board should consider granting the special permit for the DCOD. We have provided 2 letters of support, one from 313 Merrimack Street, which is right next door, and one from 14 Butler Street, which is next door up in the back. And with that, we'd ask the board's consideration of granting the permit. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll close that portion of the public hearing and go to public comment. And not many people in the room, but does anyone wish to be heard? Seeing none. Anyone online wish to be heard? Let's see. Do not see any hands raised online. So we will go ahead and close that portion of the public hearing and go to questions from the board, and we'll begin with Mr. Swanton.
I have no questions.
Mr. Bennett,
I don't either.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
What's going on? Excellent presentation.
They are questionless.
I had two, well, one of them's more of a comment. I assume this will have a full foundation under it and you won't repeat previous bills pouring a slide.
For the section.
Yeah.
That's being, yeah, it's, I think, the engineer, said like 4 feet.
Full
minimum.
crosswalk,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And the second one, just as a comment, I mean, just looking at the building, even all your drawings, there's no way you're taking 29% of the walls down unless you include, where you're touching all the front French doors. Is that
Yeah,
fine?
so
All
it
that
is,
work?
believe me, we calculated this very carefully. We prefer to be under the 25%.
I
So,
think for 4.5%, they should have let you escape.
me too, but they wouldn't. Jennifer's tough like that, you know? So because so the French doors count,
Yeah,
Right.
and both walls of that.
and then we're adding that little section on the top, so that counts. And then we changed the window on the right-hand side of that structure too. But it's really, it comes out, it's because of that two-story structure, but it is 29.5. And let me tell you, we squeezed.
Cause that's a big house.
Yeah,
You know, if you look at the front of that house and
yeah,
and the little bump out, and then the two walls going down the side.
yeah,
That's a huge surface area.
yeah. Believe me, we calculated and recalculated and recalculated.
I would have used some silly math if I were you. But
We try not to do that.
Like
It
the
wasn't a
flapping mosquito netting on the back of that, I'm like, that shouldn't.
Yeah,
happen, but, you
but
know.
no, we didn't change that window. I have no other questions.
Okay, Mr. Ginton.
I have no questions either. I have foundation written down here for my question too,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Just wanna make sure we didn't do it again, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I too have no questions. I thought it was a great presentation and, I'll save this for deliberation, but to your credit, what a fantastic, endeavor to try to preserve this kind of granular way, such a prominent historic home with such provenance. It's hard to do. It's obviously taken a long time, so I'm always impressed by that. So the detail is fantastic. No questions. I'll close, unless there's anything further, I'll close questions and go right into deliberations. And again, because we're in the DCOD, we have certain criteria and we'll have to deliberate around. Why don't we begin, Mr. Swanton, with that? And as a matter of fact, Caitlin, can you bring up the slide? Attorney Mead had a slide that was a great sort of like reference to the criteria for the DCOD.
And next, I think the next
The
slide.
next
one
yeah.
has the points. Yeah,
No, I thought we had the.
Yeah, it's in there. It's, next one perhaps, just keep scrolling through.
There we go.
That's it. All right, Attorney Mead has done a great service to every one of us by providing this as a reference.
Oh, that's the historic commission report.
Oh,
I-
yeah, the next,
I'll speak to that.
yeah, go ahead.
This, is different than most things we see, because typically we look at massing and things like that, but with DCOD, demolition control overlay district, is the only area I'm familiar with that we rule on where we look seriously at the historic value. And the ordinance talks about the historic value being a real asset to the city of Newburyport, and the zoning board of appeals is supposed to make sure the historic values are considered when any demolition is happening. It's very different. I mean, many times we'll see a beautiful old home, but we can't talk about its history. You have to talk about, oh, it's massing or whatnot. But when it comes to somebody who wants to demo more than 25%, we have to consider the history. Now, as I look at the history of what's being demoed here, those old sandboard maps, I'll bet you that was a barn or something back there with horses or something. That disappeared, and that porch that was built there sure does not look very historic to me. The historic commission, I would say, seconded that. Nobody put a little slab foundation under a historic building, back then. My family, by the way, was in shipbuilding about 90 miles to the north here in this era, so this is kind of up in Maine. So this is a personal note there, but, when I look at what's being proposed for demolition, I don't see an issue. The historic commission doesn't see an issue, so as we consider it, its historic value, which is the primary thing we're thinking about in the DCOD. I don't think there's a problem with this demolition, so I can support your application. I mean, I've skipped over the things like it's a nice house and it fits the area well. That whole shipbuilding area there in that vicinity is amazingly intact. And you have a nice house within it, and what you're doing, I doubt you'll be able to see it from the street. Maybe you'll be able to see it from Howard Street with, with a telescope. But I mean, it's not something that I think is gonna affect the area at all. I think it's done very nicely, and I applaud your application.
Very good. Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, just want to cover the waterfront on this one. And I would say that, to his point, that the proposed, the porch that's going to be torn down was not part of the original historic structure. And the evidence is clear and unrebutted that it cannot be repaired in any way. And the only proper approach would be to construct a new porch, which would be in harmony with the original structure in terms of architecture and size, massing, and scale, which the architect has done here in a very laudatory fashion. So I'm on board.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Shannon?
I agree with, what's been said. Do we want to review all the prongs yet again? Or
No.
No.
You're welcome to, but,
by reference,
we can incorporate them by reference.
right,
Sure.
that all the prongs have been met, the nine prongs of section 10H7 have been met to the satisfaction of the board. And with that, I can support the application.
Very good. Mr. Ginton?
I support the application also. I feel the same way as many of the thoughts here. This is a 200+ year old house that you're looking to save, if you will. And that's wonderful. The porch on the back of that house is not safe. It definitely needs to come down, and it is not historic. And I think what you have planned for the future of the house looks very, very well. Very nice.
I agree. Again, not to reiterate my earlier comments, but I think it's a Herculean effort. So kudos to you for undertaking it. And I think it's a wonderful presentation and a wonderful restoration as well. And I believe you applicants met the criteria and the prongs. Some of my colleagues have. Anything further in deliberations, Jeff? Hearing nothing further, I'll close that portion of the public hearing. Do we have a motion to approve and a second?
I make a motion to approve the application for the DCOD special permit for 311 Merrimack Street.
Very good.
I will second that motion.
This motion's made by Mr. Swanton, seconded by Mr. Bennett. Calling the roll, Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Ginter.
Yes.
Rob Champetti, yes. 5 in the affirmative. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Good luck to you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Okay, we're gonna circle back to Ben Becker's application, 5 Wilson Way. This is a special permit for nonconformities to construct an addition over 500 square feet on a non-conforming lot and extend a non-conforming side yard setback. Ben, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah. You
Perfect.
have the floor. Thanks for your
All right.
patience. And we can
Yeah,
see, looks like we have the slides are up, so it's, we're able to see your slides, so you can feel free to move through.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Again, my apologies to the board for being late to the meeting. My name is Ben Becker. My company is BLB Design Build. located at 6 Chestnut Street in Amesbury. I'm representing the homeowners, Katie and Andrew Early. The project is located at 5 Wilson Way in Newburyport, which is off of Colton Drive, which is off of Low Street. In case you're unfamiliar with it. The clients purchased the home in 2019 and they're in need of a more room for the growing family. So the goal of the project is to build a master suite addition with a finished basement below. The existing Cape style home was originally built in 95, so it's not a historic home. The living area is currently about 2,200 square feet, and we're proposing an addition that will add 760, which will bring the square footage to approximately 3,000. So the existing nonconformities, the lot area is 20,000 square feet is required, whereas the property is at 12,400. The frontage, we have 125 feet, where the property is at 105 feet. And the front yard setback is required 30 feet. We only have 20.4 currently, but there is no change to the front yard setback with the proposed addition. So we're good on that front. On the side setback is 20 feet. And we currently have 16.2. So the addition that we're proposing is going to be non-conforming, but it will be it won't be more non-conforming than what it currently is. And then all the other dimensional requirements are met besides those that I just listed. Next slide, please. So as I just mentioned, we're proposing to build a 760 square foot addition spanning 2 floors. It's really a first floor and a basement, but because the basement is because the height of it, it's, I guess, considered a 2-story addition. So we're adding square footage to the existing basement, which is going to become a bedroom. And then on the main floor, we're going to be taking one of the bedrooms, turning into a master bathroom, and then their master bedroom will be in the new addition. So the addition is proposed at the back of the house. It does not infringe on the required dimensional setbacks of the rear yard. We are safe on that front. So we're currently at 37.4, and the new addition will not go any further than that. Next slide, please. It's just the GIS map showing the property. Next slide, please. Next. Just photos of the existing home. So we have, this is looking at the home from the rear. So the addition is going to be on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. So it's going to be located right there. Next slide, please. So that's looking at the rear of the home. This is the left side of the home. And as you can see, that window on the bottom there that's the basement window. So the basement is only about halfway in the ground. Next slide, please. And we're going to be removing a couple trees, some shrubs that are in the backyard to make way for the addition. Next slide, please. Next. So this is the plot plan showing the proposed addition. As you can see, the existing structure doesn't meet the setbacks. We have 16.2. The new proposed addition is going to be 16.4. So it will be slightly better than it currently is, but still non-conforming. So next slide, please. And the proposed plan is right here where it says proposed basement. You can see the outline of the new foundation. So it's going to be a full foundation wall. And there's going to be a bedroom down below with a 3/4 bath, closet. There's a closet for an ejector pump, and then if you look over at the proposed first floor, where you see the master bathroom, that's currently a bedroom. And then the addition is their master bedroom suite, the hallway and their closet. So this is looking at the right elevation, which kind of abuts, I think it's Kinder Care, the child daycare. It abuts the rear of that property. Next slide, please. This is looking at it from the left side elevation, so that's their garage doors, which isn't getting affected. And then, as you can see, the addition off the back marked in red. And it's basically just a gable roof coming off the existing. We're gonna put a cricket here, and it's gonna tie into this existing gable that's their kitchen. Next slide, please. Just some 3D renderings showing what it's gonna look like. So we're tying in the two roof lines. It is not going to affect their existing second floor. The roof line is going to stay below those windows, so we're safe there. Next slide, please. Just electrical plans, elevations of the interior, which I don't think matters. Next slide. Framing plans, more elevations. Next slide, please. So the proposed addition is not going to intensify the existing nonconformities or result in additional ones. It doesn't intensify the existing nonconformities. The lot frontage is not affected, which is great. Setbacks are not changing, and while still non-conforming, the overall lot coverage is increasing by 3%. The proposed addition will not be more detrimental than the existing. The existing non-conforming setback on side B of the home is 16.2, and 20 feet is required in the R1 district. And the proposed setback will increase from 16.4, 0.2 feet less detrimental than the existing structure. That's per the certified plot plan. And the proposed addition will not be more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing. It won't be out of place. We're going to use all cedar clapboards to match the existing, same windows, same roofing. So it's all going to tie in nicely. And I believe that is the last slide. Lisa is a tough act to follow, so bear with me. That will conclude my presentation.
Okay, thanks very much, Ben.
Thank you.
So we'll close the presentation portion and go to public comment. We have an empty room, so I'm guessing, not expecting to see any hands. I don't see any hands online, so we will close the public comment, go to questions from the board. Ken? Mr. Chapman.
Yes, you know, Lisa may be a hard act to follow, but I appreciate your conciseness, which was an improvement. Could you put up a site plan for a second? I'm just curious about, I mean, this seems like a nice little neighborhood. I went through there today. There's two, you show on the site plan, two folks on Low Street, 159 and 141, that are gonna be the most impacted by this thing. Have you or the homeowner discussed it with them, or do you have any input from them? Obviously, they're not here tonight complaining. They did not send letters in. Can you speak to the abutters?
We haven't contacted the abutters, and they haven't heard anything from them, but there is a lot of trees that separate the property and some evergreens. There's a significant amount of privacy that's given by those trees. You can see in some of the pictures from the rear lot that
Yeah, I noticed that. You can see it from the street as well.
Yeah,
No, actually, I have no other questions. Thank you very much.
all right, thank you.
All right, Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, I just have one. Can you, I don't see anything in your materials here, which would give me a sense of how the size of your project, if approved, would compare to the neighboring parcels. I see the photo, but can you just comment on that?
We didn't do any comparisons of the other properties, but I've been to many homes in this area and they are, a lot of the, it's a newer development, right? A lot of them are built in the 90s and 80s, and most of them are over 3,000 square feet. So the ones off of Colton Drive, not so much. They're mostly like split level, there's some split level ranches. But on this side of on Wilson Way, there's some really sizable homes, as well as Woodward Drive has some really large homes that are over 3,000.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I just had one question. It's more out of curiosity. With the addition, you're gonna end up with two gable roofs on the back projecting from the building. What kind of roof do you have in between them? Are you putting like a cricket in
Correct. Yeah, a cricket's gonna go in between.
between the two roofs?
Correct.
Okay. So it sheds water back towards both roofs?
Yeah, and right now it's actually there's like
Oh, I see.
a shed roof that comes off of it. It's kind of
Okay, and that roof extends towards the backyard.
correct. Yeah, so there's not
Okay.
gonna be any snow buildup or anything.
Right. That's the only question I had, Chair. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Ginta.
I have no questions.
Great. I have no questions. We'll close that portion and go to deliberation, starting with Mr. Swanton, deliberating the criteria.
Right, well, we're back to the old two-prong test. Are there any new nonconformities? There are none, so it passes that. Then is it substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than its current stated nonconformity? I don't think so. I can support this. I think the addition is in the back. It's not like it's dwarfing the other houses in the neighborhood. I don't think it's gonna change the character of the house or the street that much. So I can support this application.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, I can as well, based upon the testimony. It would appear that the addition would fit within the neighborhood in terms of size and scale of the neighboring houses. So although it's a somewhat large addition, it seems to fit within the neighborhood nicely. So I can.
Very good. Mr. Shannon.
I agree, and, driving around there, I thought it was so densely wooded that the addition would almost be of no concern except in the dead of winter. Because it is a sizable addition, but it's actually doesn't appear to be bigger than the addition that's sticking out the back of the house now. So if anything, it will add symmetry. With that said, I can support the application, and I also would just note that it does trigger the tree and sidewalk ordinance. However, the Department of Public Services is not calling for any new street trees or sidewalk upgrades.
Very good. Mr. Ginta.
I support this. I see no impact on the neighbors. It almost appears to be open space behind them.
Yeah.
And they seem to be heavily wooded on both sides, so I don't see anything.
Thank you. I agree. Generally speaking, I think it's passable, more than passable, an appropriate and very well presented application. I too can support it. Any further deliberations? We have a motion to approve in a second.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the special permit for nonconformities for 5 Wilton Way.
Very good. And a second. Mr.
I'll
Bennett.
second it.
Motion's made by Mr. Swanton, seconded by Mr. Bennett, calling the roll. Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yeah.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Ginta.
Yes.
And Rob Champetti, yes, 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. Motion carries. Mr. Becker, good luck and your application's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Have a great night.
Have a great night. Thank you for your patience.
Take care.
Okay, that concludes our public hearings for this evening, so I'll close the public hearing portion of our meeting. We'll go into our business meeting. We have the approval of our minutes from 4/9/2024. I was absent 4/9, so I don't have any comments on the minutes. Anyone have any comments, revisions, requests? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
Very good. Motion made by Mr. Swanton, seconded by Mr. Knight. This is voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? No votes, abstentions, none. The ayes have it, motion carries. Minutes are approved. Thank you, Gretchen. Okay, now we have the discussion on STRUs, and I believe we have logged on, having been very patient, our city solicitor, Attorney Karis North, who is with us. Attorney North, can you hear us?
I can. Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you for your time this evening and for your patience, and of course for your time and detail in providing us with the memorandum entitled Advice Concerning Short-Term Rental Units dated April 18th, 2024, where you address for board members and all else, it looks like 5 specific questions that were posed to you. And so we have the memorandum. I think we've all certainly read it, reread it, but I wanted to open the dialogue for you to offer to us any your additional thoughts or concerns or guidance, and then maybe board members might have specific questions. If that is a good way to approach this, why don't we start with, is there anything outside of the memo that you want us to sort of direct specific attention to? And then maybe we can pose questions from board members while we have the courtesy of your expertise.
Of course. I really don't have anything, and I'm apologizing for you getting my picture. I think there's I'm not sure if I can, not figuring out how to turn my camera on here, but in any event, that's my face. But I am actually back here. I don't have anything additional with respect to the questions or the advice. I think that, you know, the process in the ordinance, you know, requires a variety of conditions that have to be met in order to be eligible to apply for a special permit. And then there is also the, here we go. Sorry, it promoted me to a panelist and then muted me. So I think I may have been cut off. So the ordinance has preconditions upon which have to be met in order to apply for a special permit. And then there is also the licensing process, obviously. And, you know, some of the questions that you asked, while you have to consider in the special permit process, it may be a situation where you don't have all of the facts initially, and it may be something that you develop over time. So, you know, although all of these STRUs will have been pre-existing, so there could very well be facts that can be developed into the record. And obviously, I think you caught from my memo, this, as in every application, will be very fact specific.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that certainly, and we know that everything is case by case. So it's almost impossible and a challenge, to say the least, even to deign to pose these questions to you, but we certainly appreciate you taking each of them the way you have. And I think, Ken, you had offered a lot of these questions.
Yeah,
So I want to give Mr. Swanton, our vice chair, who's the author of this sort of framework of questions, the opportunity to address some of the responses and maybe pose additional questions. So, Ken.
Yeah, thank you. You know, we heard about the STRU being developed, that we were going to be a special permit granting authority, so we discussed it as a group. I wrote down some of our questions, we discussed them, and we sent them off to you. I'm glad I see your response, because I've heard 2 extremes. I've heard some people say, oh, well, the city council has approved this as a use, so we have to say yes. I've heard other people say, well, if you have a street where everything is residential and somebody wants to do one of these things, it's for a business on that street and we have to say no. And what I read from your letter is more of a nuanced approach that's in between those two, where we don't automatically say yes or automatically say no. We we consider each one of them separately. If, for example, there's documented evidence of complaints about an existing STRU, because I can imagine we may have one where the room is full with people complaining about someone in the neighborhood. And if those complaints are documented by, say, by our planning department and our zoning enforcement officer, then what I read here is we would have grounds to say no to something like that, but we don't automatically just say no to them all just because they're in a residential zone. So I guess that's what I took out of your note. Am I kind of getting the gist of what you're trying to say here? That it is a nuanced approach. We have to consider each separately and look at the facts of each candidate.
Correct. Yes, it is a very nuanced approach. There is no, black and white. It's a commercial enterprise in a residential district. Therefore, it's going to automatically have a negative impact on the neighborhood. That is not the instance. And again, a special permit is still a discretionary instrument. So it requires the good faith evaluation and of the permit application by the zoning board, the special permit granting authority. So you do have to take whatever facts you have. And I think I noted just based on my experience, you need to make sure those facts are actually supported with evidence, not just somebody's opinion or somebody's complaint, but a complaint that's been backed up by complaining to the zoning enforcement officer or complaining to the police or something, writing letters, some type of documentation that's not just, oh, well, they're loud. Well, how loud are they? When are they loud? How often are they loud? Things like that. Just to get to try to develop facts that would support whether or not, and your questions were all focused on, whether or not the STRU is detrimental to the neighborhood question as part of your analysis. So that's the piece where you have to rely on your experience and expertise and discretion, but that also has to be based in the record that's developed before you.
Yeah, and I have one other question, which is, at one point in our discussions, we were thinking, if we have to decide whether this is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than what's there now, it's hard to imagine, a house turning into a short-term rental unit not being substantially more detrimental. But that quick answer, you seem to say, no, you can't do that. That's just kind of arbitrary. You can't assume it's going to be more detrimental just because it's a short-term rental unit. I mean, maybe I'm applying the wrong criteria here, but that's usually the criteria. If we have a room full of people out here and they say this is going to be detrimental and it's a house now, you shouldn't let it turn into a short-term rental unit, because that'll be detrimental. That's kind of compelling sometimes if you have, 8 or 9 neighbors saying that.
I think to your point, though, that's the part that's compelling. If no one showed up and we made that decision just because it's a business in the neighborhood,
Yeah.
that is arbitrary and capricious.
But she seems to be saying that even if they show up.
But we do that in every hearing. If 6 people come in here and say, I don't want that tall building next to me, we take that into account.
No, I understand, but
But we're not compelled to, right? We're not compelled to use it, but we're allowed to.
But she seems to be saying we can't just do that. They need to have documented with like the zoning enforcement officer that there are past problems.
That's
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I didn't want to.
that's an example. If you have 8 people that show up that say, I don't want this in my neighborhood, I would at least want you to ask them to articulate why. Right? And not just because I don't like short-term rental units, but something more substantive. And again, that's where you have the expertise in asking questions of the public, and you have to determine whether that is just simply an opinion because someone doesn't like the concept, or there's actually an impact to the neighborhood. And that's that's where your discretion is utilized here.
I think it's much in the same way when people put additions on the back of buildings and they can be seen from 3 houses around us. Sometimes we listen to these neighbors, right? And sometimes we don't.
Right.
And sometimes we offer something in the middle, screening, fences, trees. So I think we can, case by case, make that decision. I think it's interesting that her comment was, you can't just across the board say no.
Right.
That is arbitrary and capricious. Because we had that discussion in one of our meetings.
Yeah.
Is there a place in STRU can exist in a residential neighborhood? And some would argue it can't.
Well,
And I think,
but now it can by special permit in certain districts.
that's an ordinance rather than opinion.
Oh, you mean?
I might have an opinion that differs from the
Of
ordinance
Right.
as a board member.
No, I didn't mean to take exception to that at all, I just meant that we toil with that all the time,
Exactly.
that's why we get paid the big bucks here at the zoning board of appeals.
Yeah.
We have to make difficult decisions often in the face of overwhelming opinion.
Yeah.
And sentiment, and righteous sentiment at that, that's very well thoughtful and articulated.
Yep.
And so we have to be, I've been, and I know you have too, and we all have, we've been on boards where even in the face of that torrent of velocity of an opinion aligning a certain way, we as board members have made decisions that were contrary to
That's right.
the rage of a room, right?
Yeah.
And that's the hardest as just neighbors and citizens and volunteer members of the board to try to be, dispassionate and objective. And I think the objectivity piece that Attorney North is telling us is our charge, our discretion is that if we are faced with folks that come in and say, any commercial use in a residential zone is by its nature, by its species, is substantially more detrimental than existing conditions. We must, on its face, reject that pending further evidence that compels each of us. And if enough of each of us feel that way, then we are, as a board, sway, right? But every single case is gonna be born of that like molecular, granular information from the room. Some of it will be loud, some of it will be quiet and powerful and everywhere in between. So I think, we have to be very careful to create any sweeping standards because
Right.
we're a discretionary board that sets no precedent. So we have to take, that's a shield. Again, I use that term maybe too much, a shield and a sword. Like the fact that we set no precedent means we can make a case by case decision and be, unmaligned by the future. If someone were to come back and say, yes, but you did this way back in 2024. That liberates us as well. But yeah, I mean, I really appreciate this.
Yeah, me too. I like
I
that.
think it's
Question
well-
one was rubber stamp, right? Are we
Yeah.
supposed to rubber stamp all of these? And question two is, we can deny them all on their face because they're in a residential neighborhood.
Right.
And it's not either one.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
It's case by case basis. Well, I mean, we did have discussions that, if we were allowed to make a decision as a board that an STRU in a residential area was substantially more detrimental, we could say no to all of these.
Good.
Exactly.
And I think what the solicitor is saying, that you should probably not take that approach because that could be fought in court as being capricious.
I agree with you. I agree with you on that. And Attorney North, we appreciate, and I mean, just as one member of the board, I appreciate these aren't easy questions to address. A lot of them are, what ifs, and they're hypothetically driven, but at the same time, they provide some guardrails for us. We are a board, not just of, the permit granting authority, but we're also the board of first impression in a new ordinance, applying it in good faith. And we want to make sure that we don't, take on the wrong sort of habit and find ourselves unable to be defended
Right.
in that. Yes, Mr. Ginta.
So we haven't seen one of these yet, but how many, or does somebody need to get this approval once and they're good for until they sunset? I think this law sunsets, if I remember it correctly.
3 years.
So do you come once and then you're good till it sunsets, or you have to come every time you have a new?
What, tenant? No, I mean, new guest? No, it's once you get the special permit, it is yours, you have it, unlike say, 9B2B3, which is the, in-law apartment, right? That is something that has to be renewed annually, and is often overlooked, right? But you have to recertify. Here, you have, once your ticket's stamped, so to speak, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's 3 years, and then you have to come back, because if it were any shorter, based on the inventory that they had initially done, they being city council and public groups that were, sort of watchdogging this effort, the general consensus on just simply the identified number of STRUs citywide was such a number that if we gave up one slot of a 5 docketed slot every night, it would take us 5 years to simply get through the inventory of permitting. And that presupposes that we give up 20% of every evening, right? Like, we already know what our evenings are like. And so that means that before we could get through the list once, the people we first approved would have 2 years prior come up for renewal. We would never get ahead of that curve. It was sort of ludicrous. So I think they changed it. They made Plum Island, of course, Plum Island's not in this paradigm. And so it seems like the number's lesser. I think that when we start to get them, I thought it was gonna be a torrent of.
Well, it's only owner.
Right.
It's not owner occupied. It's investment.
So it's a significant, they pared down, they're right. They
Yeah,
pared
it's
down-
maybe 10% of the total volume.
Yes.
Just add, it's good that we're having a discussion tonight, because on your next agenda, you do have one.
Oh, we do. Which would be the address?
Congress Street.
11 Congress Street. Okay.
So just now that I know that information, reading through this and thinking, everybody who comes in front of us is coming in with a clean slate.
Yeah,
Unless they've been doing it and there's some baggage that follows them.
well,
Exactly.
But
they
Right.
will
Which
have been
is-
doing
is
it,
out
but
there.
for minority, most of these are identified or identifiable. Let's assume that, I think the majority will be people looking to get
Yeah,
a ticket punch.
given the 3-year sunset here, I think very few people will go into this business new here. It will be the existing
Okay.
ones who want to just
So-
be going for 3 years.
So would we get a report from the Newburyport police on how many times they were called about a particular list? Is it, how would we know? How would I know?
Well, I mean, like anything else, we know, a butters notification notifies a butters.
Okay.
And no one more so than immediate adjacent to butters presumably
Yeah.
would be in the more intimate know. We could, if we had a mechanism to reliably do so, we could seek out additional, information and building it, and that's just not the police department, building department, health department,
Yeah,
other such things. But I believe that the neighborhood of butters in the relevant places where these applications are gonna come from are gonna be the sort of eyes and ears on the ground, and they will all be notified, and if someone feels a certain way, you can be sure they'll be here, I think. But maybe not, but we're soon to find out,
I also asked Andy Port this question today,
Yeah.
and apparently Jennifer, the Blanchet, the zoning enforcement officer, quite a few of the complaints hit her. So
Yeah.
she'll have a backlog of the real problem children, if you will.
okay.
Yeah.
So let's say hypothetically, a brand new person comes in 2 weeks from now and says, yeah, just bought this house in Newburyport, this is what I'm gonna do for 3 years.
Right.
And we say, well, we got nothing against you, I mean,
Yeah.
there's nobody here and we approve you. And then a month later, we start getting complaints.
Well, we wouldn't get complaints, the complaints would go to the police department, the zoning enforcement
Would
commissioner.
that
Excuse
come
me,
back
Mr.
to
Chair?
us?
Yes,
This is Andy. Sorry, I had raised my hand, but I wasn't sure if anybody was noticing.
oh, sorry, Andy, I didn't even know you were here, man. Andy, are you inside of that box?
I am, yeah. Again, I think the emphasis on Karis's answer to question 2, you're looking at every instance individually as it's coming in.
Yeah.
So like Larry said, you have the ability to look at if there's a history there that's verified through the zoning administrator, through the police department, other evidence, that can be used. That may provide valid grounds for denying a permit, but generally speaking, the policy level question of whether or not short-term rental units are a problem in a residential neighborhood has been at least initially indicated by the council that they didn't see that as, universally across the board problematic. They were saying, look at each instance individually for these investor units. And remember, you only are looking at the investor units. There's a short duration of time that these are actually eligible, to be happening.
Right.
So the main thing I would say is that, as they're coming in the door and they're getting these permits, the main thing here is that nuisance issues are primarily being addressed through the licensing end of this, which is to say that unless you're seeing something coming in the door that's clearly problematic and should not be approved in the first place for this, again, short duration, the essence is that the permit is granted consistent with the ordinance, following all the rules. And if there is an issue that's a nuisance after that period of time, the license commission, with evidence from the zoning administrator and other sources, police department and others, are going to pull the license of that use, which then goes back to the zoning permit. They'd be invalid under their permit. Here, your permit. So bottom line is the license commission is there to deal with primarily the nuisance issues.
That's right. And the license is an annual license. So even though there's a special permit for 3 years, they still have to get licensed every year and go back to that licensing board, which is where you're going to be dealing with, as Andy said, more of those nuisance issues.
Yeah, that's a great point, Attorney North. So we would see at least a 12-month, circulation of how are they operating, how are they executing? So that's something that the licensing commission would be first, the permit granting authority, they would be sort of the leading edge of that. Any other comments or thoughts or questions for Attorney North?
The discussion has made me think, would it make sense? I mean, I don't think we're gonna get 6 of these a week, every meeting. Would it make sense for us to actually reach out to the police department and ask them if there've been complaints for each address as it comes up? Or is that something they would not do to us? I mean, I assume
Again,
that
if I could speak to that.
Any one of us or everyone of us could do it.
We could ask the planning department to do it.
I would say, look, I mean, you can, but I feel like these guys, I don't know if do you have the bandwidth to do stuff like that? Because once you start, that you won't get the genie back in the bottle.
That's right.
If you say yes, it's gonna be, you might want to wait for Andy to come out of the box, that kind of.
Yeah, if I could just briefly suggest that the burden is on the applicant or the abutters to challenge the application. You listen to the evidence. You don't necessarily put evidence into the record. That's not really your job. And I'm betting that might be what Andy was going to say.
Though, in fairness, Attorney North, it's not outside of the purview of what the board does that sort of work when we go on site and do drive-bys and applications. We examine for ourselves. It's this passive and, an examination, I think, or vetting. It maybe is analogous to the idea of driving by a special permit for nonconformities and taking a look at a neighborhood, but again, I agree with you. I think that we are the permitting body and the appeals board for that matter, so it is incumbent upon the applicant and the butters to give us details that we vet and we evaluate the weight of and then make determinations. If the planning department's able to and inclined to give us additional information, not unlike their staff report does right now, they could, and maybe that is sort of an evolution for down the road. Any one of us can simply make an inquiry if you were inclined, but because this is all public record, right? But at the end of the day, I think whatever we say we're gonna do and start doing becomes what's done. So we just.
If someone brings something up and we're not sure we have the data, we could always have a continuance and then go ask the police if we had to.
We could, yeah, and if it's been alleged, we can.
Right.
We could establish that if someone's going to come in and make such a statement and ask that we take it as part of our body of information and evidence, that they be be advised to be prepared, just like, folks come in right now with historic data and research and say, yes, this building was owned by a shipbuilder and it has, this architectural and historic provenance, and here's the research. We have, there's no shortage of that exists now, and sort of how we deal with other applications. So I suspect maybe this will fall that way, but we're about to start finding out. Yeah. Did anyone have anything else?
I just want to make one comment.
Yeah.
I did write these things down. I just want to thank you, our city solicitor. I think what happened was, this was an intense political issue. We heard it from both sides. I would hear people, who are pushing, the STRUs say, hey, if the city council approves them, you have to say yes. Then I heard people fighting, and I live in the heart of the South End where it's most intense. And people fighting it would say, no, it's a business and in a residential zone, you have to say no. So I just want to thank you for putting the nuance in here and clearing out both of those statements as being incorrect. You have to consider them on a case-by-case basis and look at the facts. And I just want to thank you and for hanging in there tonight at this late hour.
I know this late out.
I agree.
Yeah,
Um,
no problem. Happy to help. And one of the reasons I put that reference to the Nantucket case in there was just as an example. I mean, obviously you all have been doing this for quite some time and how it works, but just an example about, some of the facts that were asked in a particular case, not about short-term rentals, but about, the concept of, whether or not something was substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood or to the community. So, and happy to answer questions as they come up, as you all refine your knowledge and understanding and the process as you move forward. I guess the last thing I want to mention is that investor-owned STRUs are supposed to have their applications in for special permits within 6 months from the effective date of the ordinance. So you're gonna, there's gonna be a cutoff too in not a terribly long period of time. So, this will be a very well-defined universe for these investor-owned STRUs.
Right, and they die on the vine if they miss that. That's a strict liability standard. We don't have the discretion, or do we have the discretion to enlarge the timeline within which it can be filed? I suppose unless required under the ordinance, we do have that discretion.
It is
Well-
required under the ordinance, though.
What's that, Andy?
It is required under the ordinance, though. I don't think that leaves latitude for the board.
Okay, well,
I would
perhaps a
agree.
question perhaps a question for another day. Anything else for Attorney North before? Thank you very much, and again, on all of our behalf, thank you for the time and your patience this evening, as well as your expertise. It's a pleasure to meet you. So thanks for the support.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure to meet you all. Have a good evening.
All right, very good. Thank you. Okay, so
Just to clarify something, under our zoning ordinance, the chair is authorized to administer oaths, summon witnesses, and call for production of papers.
Ooh, that's some power right there.
Well, yeah, I'd be curious how
You
you
should
do
be at
that.
the police station every
should
Tuesday.
summon- I don't know.
I'll get right on that. We'll see. We'll see how many.
I'll get right on
rolling stop sign incidents I find myself around. Start summoning our women and men in
You
blue.
have vast powers here,
It is,
summon witnesses.
I'm already drunk with that power. Okay. No, I think that's a fair. Say that.
Ask for papers.
We're gonna hold like congressional hearings. Did you order the code red? Okay,
Damn right I did.
we have other updates from the chair. I have none. Any updates from you, Andy, or Caitlin?
Nothing I can think of now. Thank you.
Very good. Do we have a motion to adjourn? So moved. Seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, guys. Thank you.